Every morning is a blessing, and we thank God for being here today, for me in the studio, and for you at the other end. This is the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakpo, and we're always glad to have you. I do this as always together with Bernice Abubedu-Lanza. Now, here's what you can look forward to this morning on the show. The news, as always, will be coming your way next. Right after that, the news review, and we'll be joined by Kweku Painso, a lawyer, as we dissect the latest news from the newspapers. But then we get into our big stories today, and we continue our conversation on Ghana, a nation that begs. I'm sure you've already seen Isaac Kofi Adjei's documentary yesterday at 8:30 p.m. on how Ghana has continuously sought support from the International Monetary Fund. We're a country that begs. Well, our guest on that discussion to dilate on how we fared, how we're faring, and how we shall fare, putting in place the right mechanisms, Dr. Saad Iddrisu, economist, Louisiana Economic Development. We also have Professor Charles Aka. He's a senior research fellow with ISSA, and Dr. Arthur Kennedy, a political activist. We also have, joining that specific conversation, Dr. Abusakara Foster. He is founder of the National Interest Movement. But moving away from our economic woes, the Media Foundation for West Africa, in partnership with the National Peace Council, the National Media Commission, and the National House of Chiefs, will host a public forum on the theme Media, Hate Speech, and Democratic Consolidation in Ghana. The forum will discuss the growing incidence of hate speech and abusive language in the media and public discourse and the dangers they pose for Ghana's democracy. We'll bring you details of that later on the show. But the 14th day of June is World Blood Donor Day, and we will again celebrate it here in Ghana, as it will be throughout the world. The day provides a special opportunity to celebrate and thank voluntary blood donors around the world, like yours truly, for their gift of blood, and it has become a major focus for action towards achieving universal access to safe blood transfusion. Now, the slogan for the 2023 World Blood Donor Day campaign is Give Blood, Give Plasma, Share Life, Share Often. Sharing is caring. We'll be hearing from our major stakeholders on why you need to donate to support the National Blood Bank. And later on the show, as always, we offer you that opportunity of getting interactive with us. What are we without you? Ubuntu, right? So in the course of the show, shoot us a message via our live stream, and at the tail end, be sure to give us a buzz. On that note, people of Ghana and beyond, let's settle for the news up next. Let's settle for the AM news now. In our first story, it is emerging that a police CID investigation into the activities of the defunct Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining cleared its secretary, Charles Bissiou, and 8 others, including 5 policemen, of any culpability. We're learning that following the broadcast of the documentary Galamsey Fraud by investigative journalist Anas Arumeyaw, Anas, then chairman of the IMCIM, Professor Kwabena Frimpong-Boateng, wrote to the Interior Minister asking that he task the police CID to investigate the matter. The police concluded that it did not find any of the suspects culpable. Legal Affairs correspondent Joseph Akable has more.
There are 2 motions pending in the courts. The first has to do with a request for production of documents, specifically the petition that gave rise to the investigation by the special prosecutor into the activities of Charles Bissiou while as he served as secretary of the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining. The second one is a motion for injunction asking that the court restrains the special prosecutor from investigating Charles Bissiou. Lawyers for Mr. Bissiou, led by Nane Jewa, informed the court that they take the view that in order to move the motion for injunction, they would have to have access to the said documents first. And so they consider it important to their request for injunction. Lawyers for the special prosecutor, led by Dr. Isidore Tufo, however, disagreed. Dr. Tufo told the court that nowhere in the substantive case filed by Charles Bissiou does he make reference to any such document. And so if after filing their case, they have discovered such fresh document that they believe exist, they should take steps, appropriate steps, and not seek to tie that one to the injunction, to ask the court to hold on until it determines the request for those documents. The judge agreed with this particular view, saying that as far as she is concerned, she doesn't think the two motions are connected. But she nonetheless opted to adjourn proceedings because of a request by lawyers for Charles Bisu. The lead counsel, Nane J. had indicated that he is unwell. And so the case has been adjourned to July 4 with the understanding that it is likely that the court will first take the motion for injunction before it considers any other matter. We know that a special prosecutor is already investigating Charles Bisu in respect of the ongoing probe into the activities of the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining. This is entirely different from this case here, because this one borders on that investigation that was done by way of the documentary published by investigative journalist Anas Arimia Anas. For joining us on the Law Courts Complex, my name is Joseph Akable.
Now, a professor of epidemiology at the University of Health and Allied Sciences, Professor Fred Binka, has shut down the implementation of the Agenda 111 policy as a measure to prepare for a pandemic. He says the construction of 111 district health facilities is not feasible, indicating the projects would only increase the number of uncompleted government structures due to the lack of funding. He was speaking at the University of Health and Allied Sciences Send Ghana Health Advocacy Incubator Symposium on Public Health Emergency Funding.
One of the two critical things that we took out from the COVID was that there were not enough health facilities across the country. So we rightly started what is called Agenda 111. To increase health infrastructure. Okay? 111 hospitals. Goodness. That's a great idea. But why couldn't we just say, okay, this year we'll build 20, next year 20, till we get to what? 111. So far, we haven't built any. Okay? When is the first one going to finish? So we've just gone on a tangent. The truth of the matter is that the Agenda 111 will have many uncompleted structures in the bush at the end of the day. That's the truth. You all know it. I've not seen the budget for the equipment. Building brick and mortar is not a hospital. If you can't find money to build a brick and mortar, how are you going to fund the equipment? Number two, have you made preparations for the human resource that make the hospital function? As of yesterday, I heard 6,000 nurses have gone to real greener pastures, and more will follow. 6,000. This is not a joke. So we got 100 million to start up the Agenda 111. Look, sometimes I'm not sure how these things work, but at the last count, we were told that the Agenda 111 would cost almost $1 billion. When you get 100 million, you don't start to build 111. You have to face it in. Or now you have started 111 hospitals all over the place. Have you got the 900 million? Now we are to IMF. Big IMF comes and says, I'm sorry, you can't be investing in capital expenditure when you can't find money to pay your salaries of your workers. Or you can't give textbooks to your school people. I don't want to get into that politics.
Now, the local government ministry is urging metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives to apply their internally generated funds to ensure development in their areas without relying on funds from government. Sector Minister Dan Botwe says many of the projects in the various assemblies could be executed without the assemblies relying on government. Jacqueline Ansuma-Yeboah has more from her visit to various beneficiary MMDAs of the Greater Accra Resilient and Integrated Development Project.
Part of Greater Accra region over the years has been subjected to perennial flooding occasioned by poor sanitation, drainage infrastructure, overcrowded spaces, and weak regulatory enforcement. The Greater Accra Resilient and Integrated Development Project, Garid, is the first in a series of projects designed to build the resilience. The Minister for Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development, Mr. Dan Boche, expressed his satisfaction on the project done so far by the Ablekuma West and Central municipalities.
Funds are released to them to do the sorting, to do sensitization, and I think they have done very well. It's a project that depends on their program and implementation, and the result that they get money according to the results they get. But this year, we ensure that almost all the assemblies get the same money. And we felt that if people don't perform well, we should rather sanction the officials in the assemblies instead of they getting less money so that they can do what is expected of them. But by and large, it's clear that what is expected of them, they have lived up to expectation in terms of the understanding of the problem, the design for the solutions. Because each assembly is supposed to have a drainage map.
He also revealed that other works that need to be done in the municipalities should be taken care of by the MCs using their internally generated funds to ensure all the needs of the people are met in their localities.
What they have done has reduced the incident of flooding, and we are hoping that beyond the funds that have come from the Weber-supported project of Garid, the assemblies, as we discussed, went to the Takoradi station, should use their internally generated funds to do some of these things, because we saw some of the weeds in the drains. You don't need a project before you clear those things. And that's what we are going to use as a way of measuring their performance, especially the MNDCs. We are going to hold them accountable to that. So the area that we have visited, we expect them to use their internally generated funds to do some basic things of clearing the drainage, so that at least many people will not suffer when there's flooding.
MC of Ablekuma North, Kofi Asare, acknowledged his delay in starting the Garid project and assured the minister that he will begin it on Tuesday.
We are starting the work tomorrow by God's grace. So don't let us do any rush work and say, oh, because you are coming in 2 weeks, so we'll be rushing. You come 2 weeks, see us doing the work. You understand? I believe in good work than to rush and say, because you are coming in 2 weeks' time. Because when you start it today and it rains tomorrow, what do? Do we say because you are coming, so what can we do? So let's pray to God that He give us good weather, so that from tomorrow when we start, by 2 weeks time, by the time you come here, whatever you want to see, that is what you come and meet.
The minister is currently visiting all 17 assemblies to ensure all the funds allocated has been put to use. For Joy News, Jacqueline Ansuma Yeboah.
In our next story, residents of Jako, a suburb of Techiman in the Bono East region, are worried about what they describe as foot dragging on the part of municipal authorities to evacuate a pile of refuse unattended to in the area. They say the abundant refuse, coupled with its stinking odor, could lead to the outbreak of cholera and other communicable infections. Correspondent Anas Sabit was in the community and came through with this report. We'll bring you details of that story much later. But now, on to Ghana's cocoa industry, which could collapse by the year 2080 if the current rate of environmental degradation continues unabated. This was revealed by Director of the Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies at the University of Ghana, Professor Christopher Gordon, at the launch of the maiden biannual Forum on Natural Resources, Environment, Climate Change and Science. Carlos Caloni reports.
In the face of growing concerns about the deterioration of Ghana's natural environment, the Media Platform on Environment and Climate Change, MPEG, and Afro-Sino Center for International Relations, ASCIR, have held the maiden biannual Forum on Natural Resources, Environment, Climate Change and Science, BIMNEX. Speaking at the forum, Director of the Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies at the University of Ghana, Professor Christopher Gordon, revealed that recent research has shown that Ghana's cocoa sector could collapse by year 2080 if the rate of environmental degradation continues.
There's a statistic which has been quoted. This is coming back from 2000 from the NCAP study. This is the Netherlands Climate Adaptation Program. The projection is that by 2080, we cannot grow cocoa in Ghana except as an ornamental crop, because the conditions will have changed so much.
To help reverse the dangerous effect of environmental ruin, Executive Director of the MPEG said the biannual forum is to help enhance national conversation on climate issues.
We want to enhance our contribution to the debate, to the conversation on how to streamline things when it comes to sound natural resources management, environmental protection, climate change adaptation and mitigation, and the role of science, because science must come in with the innovation and with technology to back whatever development we want to see in our nation. And so we want to start that, and that is what we have started here today.
Speaking to Joy News, some environmental journalists highlighted threats, lack of interest in the field, as well as difficulty accessing information from public officials as major hurdles.
Journalists have shied away from reporting on the environment because it's not a sexy subject. It's so hard. So that's why I started with interest. If you have an interest, you want to seek answers and you want to go to the experts to break it down.
And when you are looking for information, or you find out something, you want the public official to make a pronouncement on it, it becomes very difficult. Then if you dare to go into areas where, whether it is large-scale mining or small-scale mining is taking place, you are putting your life on the line, because people see you as trying to take their food out of their mouth.
Professor from the University of Media, Art and Communication, UNIMAC, Modestus Fosu, charged media practitioners to remain ethical and strong-willed in the face of political intimidation on environmental reporting.
That if you do your work sincerely with honesty, not with any biased mind, and you do so ethically, the intimidation should be something the journalist should be able to surmount. It's difficult, but I only encourage journalists to be strong, to be able to feel in their conscience that they are doing the right thing. And sometimes when things come up and people realize that you are just doing your job, and rather than that is the society or the sections of society, government, machinery and so on, that are intimidating you because of the good work you are doing, you have the public support.
My name is Carlos Caloni for Joy News.
Well, we're going back to our previous story where residents of Jakoi, suburb of Techiman in the Bono East region, are worried about what they describe as feet dragging by the municipal authorities to evacuate a pile of refuse unattended to in the area.
The Sustainable Development Goal 6 speaks about ensuring access to water and sanitation for all. It talks about the need for us to have a clean environment so the people will stay healthy. However, the people of Mampusla and a suburb of Techiman in the Bono East region are lamenting the negative effects of insanitary conditions within the community. For the umpteenth time, we are here to tell this same story. City authorities, the last time we came here, responded swiftly by evacuating the heap of refuse then. However, where before, the refuse has been dumped here, abandoned by authorities, and this is the level we've got into. We've been speaking with some community people on how this is affecting them in terms of their health and sanitation.
This
refuse site is affecting us in diverse ways. The stench level is worrying, so we'll be grateful if they come to our aid.
How do you believe? For who the bola mimi. So that's it. Yes, that's it. Ghana penny for Omehana Munya and Bola and Fira because we has here.
We wish authorities would come to our aid because we have a worship center here and there are school children all over, and when it's about to rain, the wind blows polythene bags into our homes and the road also gets flooded, making it difficult for people to get access to their homes.
amonfo nyoko na matwam.
These residents who are currently overwhelmed by the current situation say they do not know where to channel their grievances to after being neglected by city authorities.
I say, Oka Asembia, what's a munkuba bia? Because I say, wouldn't penny be a wine or Okobona money. Won't you mean be a money? And some Mosumabe Hunu, Timo, Edam Musuntina Moso, I had a Ghana for you know who
we don't know where to channel our grievances. We are happy you are here because without you, we won't be able to reach the authorities. Because we are also humans and the situation is worrying.
Because any penny. So now we have crew ya not bowl away with Hannah a half month for her. I think say you're fine.
There are clusters of schools around this refugee site. In the closest of these schools is Aswad Islamic Academy. Pupils of the school have been sharing with us how the abandoned refuse dump is affecting their academic activities. Basma Yusuf is a class 5 pupil of the school.
It affects us every day because when the sun scorches on it and it will be blowing us and the smell too is unpleasant, so we can't, every day we suffer like that, so we need you to come and help us.
Even though the World Health Organization has declared that the COVID-19 pandemic isn't a global health emergency anymore, pupils of this school, Aswad Islamic Academy, are being forced to still remain in their nose masks, not for COVID-19, but due to the stench that emanates from the refuse site that has been abandoned and positioned just behind the school. There are times school has to close because of the nature of the smell or odor that disrupts their studies almost on daily basis.
The refuse down, it affects us a lot in our education. Quite sometimes when we are studying in class, we are busy learning. The smell, the refuse down releases a bad smell which causes us to end the class. We move downstairs nearby the tree to get some fresh air, unless we can't continue.
Also, in terms of their health, final year pupils who are kept here as boarders are being affected heavily because the refuse site breeds mosquitoes, which eventually bring about malaria. And as I speak to you, some 3 pupils of this school are currently hospitalized because they've been diagnosed of malaria.
Some of us are in the boarding house and we can't even sleep at the night due to the mosquitoes. And mosquitoes too, when it bites you, you will contract malaria. Few weeks ago, 3 of our students have been admitted in the hospital, and even this morning one was complaining that she is sick and she is not able to come to school today. She is at the dormitory right now.
Aside this, house flies are all over during lunchtime, and this is also bringing about another health threat, possibly cholera. These pupils are currently subjected to this, and they are calling on authorities to come to their aid to save their education and then their health.
We don't feel comfortable when we are eating, and even a few months ago we stopped eating the canteen due to the house flies. And even at this time when we are about to eat the lunch, house flies are on the food, so we can't even eat the food.
Basma Yusuf, however, has a passionate appeal to government and city authorities.
I want to tell government that please, we beg them they should come and push this rubbish for us. We are suffering every day when we come to school. Every day when I come to school, one problem I think is that when I come to school, this refuse them, I am afraid to fall sick again. That's so. I wish government to come and push the rubbish down so we will get our freedom. So we'll be free from not falling sick anymore. That's all I wish from government. Thank you.
Until something urgent is being done about this precarious situation, this abandoned refuse site will continue to pose as a threat to public health to the people living here and the thousands of school-going children schooling around. Anna Sabit, Joy News. Techiman.
And on that environmental note, we cap off the news. But stay with us. Up next, shortly, we get into the news review. Do stay. We're airborne again. Thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Time now for us to get into the newspapers. Just a few that we have this morning, but we're going to make do with them. We're joined by Kweku Painter, a lawyer. Right before I get him into the fray, let me just let you know that this segment is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They are offering you, if you're a man, especially if you're in your 30s onwards, it's no longer the case that when you hit your 50s or 60s, then you should start checking your prostate. Guess what? Nowadays, it has been proven. I know people who have been to hospitals and all of that in their 30s and have issues with their prostate. Don't take it for granted. And especially people of our race, there are diseases where Caucasians and others are more susceptible. For prostate disease, we of our race are more susceptible to it. So don't take any chances. I check mine every year. I'm yet to check mine this year, but I do it every year. If you're a woman, fertility issues, so many people nowadays with fibroids, with this and that. What is the state of your fertility? That's why you ought to make tracks to Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. And here's where you can find them. In Accra, they are at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. In Kumasi, Kronum Abwehia, behind the Angel Educational Complex. In Takra, they locate them in Anaji Estates, Tema, Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama Nzema. Now, if you'd like to call, which I suggest you do, the numbers are 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease, but just the start of the news review. Mr. Painter, a very good morning to you, sir.
Fine morning.
I'm going to ask you an interesting question. You can choose to answer or not because it's a medical related issue. But when was the last time you checked your prostate? I've thrown a hot ball, a hot potato at you, huh?
I'm not sure I did. I don't believe I even ever did. I'm not sure.
Maybe you should.
Maybe yes. After hearing you.
Maybe you should. It's wreaking havoc on a number of people. Worst case scenario, what would happen is they can take your prostate out. You will still, I mean, not you as a person, but I mean for someone who may have had a lot of issues getting to that final point, they could take it out. You would still live on, I mean, practically normal life, but it has a role to play. And if it's not there, you're going to encounter a few challenges. But that's basically it. Anyway, I always do this, so I'm going to do that with you as well, Mr. Painter. It's been a while since we were on the news review. Between then and now, are there any topical issues that have come to bear that you'd like to discuss? Professor Bika, I think saying that Agenda 111 is not feasible, looking at the cost, looking at the time we're left with, and putting up all these hospitals. The Electoral Commission saying that it is being unfairly targeted, especially by the minority, and that it is always the whipping boy. Many dynamics that have happened, Galamsey from Pomboating and others. Any quick thoughts you'd like to share with us before we get into the newspapers?
I believe that, I wouldn't know, but I think Professor Frimpong Boateng's matter has dominated the news, I think, over the last 1 week. And I particularly am not happy with the way people are discussing the matter as if he has been put up or he has been targeted by reason of a report that he had shared with the press. I don't really honestly believe that that is how we must look at a discussion at all. What I recall is that I told Matreton before his publication, or rather his report was leaked. I understand with the presidency, he doesn't take responsibility for this thing coming out. But the point of the matter is that at all Matreton, there were several allegations in the press against him for alleged sale of all kinds of equipment and so forth and so on.
Right.
We don't know how much of that is validated by facts. But if I understand it right, the Office of Special Prosecutor, I mean, he's entitled to make investigations into all aspects of a matter. And therefore, the mere fact that he has done a report does not take him out of the OSP's scrutiny.
Absolutely.
And the way people are interpreting this whole exercise of him being invited to give a statement as if he's being targeted for that reason. And I don't really think that's a fair discussion. I don't honestly think so.
Right. So there are different dynamics to that conversation. Of course, there is the latest. That is practically the last bit that has come up. Charles Bissiou himself, the secretary to the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining, has been invited. There have been issues about he, together with some 8 others, having been cleared by the CID of the Ghana Police Service, among others. This, of course, the law must take its course, and if the special prosecutor feels that he ought to come and answer questions, why not? Because even when he was at post and the ANAS expose was aired, there were question marks about he himself. But you know that on the back of the report and what he himself has said, he told my colleague Evans Mensah that there were other reports he had presented to cabinet, which had also not seen the light of day, things that he had done. Recently, I saw the German ambassador lauding him, applauding him, that many more Ghanaians ought to be like Professor Frimpong Boateng. So you would understand why some people feel aggrieved, but it is just the law, so to speak, taking its course. But how then do you feel about the other side? We are greening Ghana. Every year we expend millions upon millions to green Ghana. Yet look at the state of Galamsey. Look at what we are sitting on. Everything is becoming worse, to the point where recently the Ghana Fire Service, on my show, said here that it's even becoming difficult. Yes, but now it's even becoming difficult using some of the water to douse fires in certain areas. That's how bad it is. So from the standpoint of his report never seeing the light of day until it was leaked, how do you feel about that and our fight against Galamsey?
Well, quite naturally, I think this whole exercise or this whole business of this Galamsey issue, I previously expressed my view on this show that it's a complete joke. I mean, what we're doing is a complete joke. But, I mean, having said that, we also cannot stop there. We cannot stop anywhere. In other words, as long as the problem continues to be with us, we have to find ways of resolving them, and it can only be one day at a time. And therefore, we cannot stop at it. In other words, there are risks. I mean, the medical reports have started coming out and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And what it means is
babies
that nobody
born
can
with
really...
deformities. Recently, there was a story about a place where people are contracting all kinds of diseases and they feel they are related to Galamsey activities and the water and other things they are using in the community.
Yeah, there's a great risk that we all run. I mean, it does not even matter that in Accra you can get safe water, because my mom doesn't live in Accra, for instance. We've got people all over the place. The issue is much more serious than we're all looking at. And even from our perspective, it's no longer, even though the presidency or the president or the executive take responsibility for all these matters, it's about time that individuals like you and I, everybody, communities, chiefs, everybody, the people have to deal with it within their communities the best way that they can. Because if every time that we are trying to look at, obviously we require leadership at all levels. But the real point I'm making is that now it appears that individual, everybody has to be involved one way or the other. And then we all have to take things into our hands one way or the other. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it, because it is quite clear to me that if we leave this issue, you may call it lack of leadership, you may call it leadership failures, but at the end of the day, that alone, by just describing the way we are describing it, will not solve the problem. Leadership ought to come from some angle, from the presidency, if I may put it bluntly. We've got a whole Minister of Environment. If leadership is not coming from there, direction is not coming from there, what about our chiefs? If the chiefs are not doing it, what about the MPs who come from those constituencies and so forth and so on? At the bottom line, I'm asking that local communities must take responsibility, because what is really happening is that We've got the local communities themselves who go and do these things in their own communities. They take the benefit, the gold and whatever. Nobody even benefits from this gold anyway. It is individuals that eventually become local tycoons and rich people. So therefore, I think it's about time that, as we normally put it, we all think outside the box. At the end of the day, we've got a menace. We've got, critically, serious issues. And somehow, we are not going to rest until we've got clear solutions to these problems. And it's a failure, in my honest view, on the part of the executive. And this one, I'll put the problem at the doorstep of the presidency. And if we have concluded that the president has failed in this endeavor, we're not going to clap our hands and take some joy in knowing, and people are scoring political points. It's quite clear that the previous government also could not solve this problem. And unless we all sit down and do something drastic about what we're facing in this country, I do not know what's going to happen. In 5 years, 10 years time, we do not know. But please, it's a much more critical issue than the political this thing that we are giving to it, the coloring and all of that. We need to go beyond that. That's my take on this issue of Galamsey. It's been a national failure, it's a national disgrace, and we cannot sit and just talk about the same problem every day and not solve it in some ways that are much more practical than the way we have been doing it. That's my take on this matter.
Let's get into the newspapers now, reflect on some of the stories there. We'll start with the Daily Graphic, as always. We need morally upright judges, President Akufo-Addo declares as he swears in new Chief Justice. Being a lawyer, I'm sure you're going to be pretty interested in this one. Information Minister commends graphic for digitizing archival material. And tourist arrivals surge. USA, India, Nigeria, China, top list. I'll be getting into that story. Interesting one there. On the back page, floods displace 5,000 people in the Volta region. 5,000 people. Flooding in our country. They are like siblings. So those are some of the stories. And should time suffice, which I hope it would, I'll also get into those international stories. Page 5. I feel your pain, Tinubu to Nigerians. Gambian president hints at third term bid. Are African presidents and wanting to be there ad infinitum? Be there, be there, be there. The question is, even when they are there, not a problem. What are they delivering? In Rwanda, you can always have your problems with how things are going there. I have my own problems with Paul Kagame, but the fact is he delivering? If you go to Rwanda and you see the place, a place that in the 90s, was in 1994, experienced the genocide, everything was turned on its head. And you look at what they've attained since then till now, and you look at us from 1957 and where we are, then weighing them. Do you go the Singaporean route like Lee Kuan Yew, or do you keep going our route with a so-called purported democracy? Because democracy is not just something that cuts across. In India, it is exercised differently. In the UK, we still call it democracy differently. Even the Chinese will tell you they have some element of democracy in there. So look at what is happening in Senegal, for example. Heavy rain, floods threaten Côte d'Ivoire, cocoa, and South Africa's ANC expels former Secretary General. I'll be getting into all of those, but let me start with the first. President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has sworn in Justice Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Tokonu as the 15th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court since the inception of the Fourth Republic. Laying out his expectations of the judiciary, President Akufo-Addo declared that, quote, it is crucial that we have judges who are morally upright, with intellectual integrity and with the thorough understanding of the law. After reading a long list of her rich profile at the well-attended investiture at the Jubilee House in Accra yesterday, President Akufo-Addo described Justice Tokonu as having, quote, the full grasp of the intricacies of judicial administration and therefore, quote, will be an effective leader of the judiciary, zealously defending its independence, constantly upholding its dignity, and makes a worthy successor to her predecessor. Some quick thoughts on this lawyer pencil. There are those who keep painting the judiciary with a certain dark paintbrush. I wouldn't say black, but they say the judiciary is not living up to expectation. We can talk about legal education in this country, the General Legal Council, of which the Chief Justice is a member head and how legal education has been dispensed in our country. We can talk about the dispensation of justice itself, politically and otherwise. We can talk about the James Jachikwason situation. We can talk about the Domelevo, former Auditor General situation, and why it took so long. These are some pot shots people have taken at the judiciary. What is your reaction? What are your expectations of Justice Tokono?
Oh, I think there's a universal acclamation that she's fit for the job. And obviously, I mean, I can't take it into spare parts, but generally, I mean, when you put it, there's a clear understanding or clear appreciation that she's fit for the job. Maybe that's how I want to summarize everything. She's coming to fill the job and the position, and that she's capable of delivering based on what we know about her appreciation of the law, her personal integrity, and so forth and so on. I think there's a universal acclamation. So far, I haven't heard one person who has expressed some reservation about her in terms of her ability or competence to deliver on any aspect of her calling. Don't forget that the problem about the Chief Justice is not only the highest wherever on the court, but she's also an administrator. In other words, she takes responsibility for running the courts in this country, sitting as the head of the judiciary, which is an aspect of the work in Ghana here that some people have contended that it's about time that a separation is made between the office of a Chief Justice and that of an administrator and head of the judiciary. But we haven't got there yet. So for now, speaking about her as a person, that's the way I would just go with the general flow, that she's competent. That's about all. But that's a different ball game from delivering. That's the expectation. Based on what we know about her, we reasonably believe that she would deliver. But different Chief Justices are going to go down for different things that they do or they did while they were in the office. So therefore, I would say that now that she become the Chief Justice, we're going to monitor, we're going to watch, we're going to see whether she's going to match up to the expectation that we all have of her. Because we know all Chief Justices, I don't want to descend into particulars, but I don't really believe that when they all stand up to be measured against the expectations and what they eventually delivered, they will all measure up to the same scale or the same standard. That's the way. So I'm saying that the Bible says, to whom much is given, much is expected. We've got a lot of expectations of her, and I hope that she delivers. That's, at the end of the day, how she's going to be measured in the eyes of the public. That's the way I want to pass my test on her.
You hope she delivers. And you hope she delivers. Anything specific you'll be looking forward to having her deal with moving forward in terms of our justicial system, in terms of education, for example? Any specific areas?
Yeah, it's the heading of the newspaper publication. Why would the president say we need morally upright judges? I mean, that's a statement of the problem. In other words, we even though that is the required standard, somehow we have a reason to believe that we have not measured up to it. At one of the biggest problems in this country, as far as the judicial justice delivery system is concerned, is how do we judge the judges? Right. I don't believe that the constitutional the provision that we have is adequate. It's not responding to the real issues we have, because I mean, that's what they are supposed to be. But I think we have raised our judges as gods, and they cannot be touched in so many respects. And the provision for touching judges is so arcane that, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, it's not even practical. Let me put it this way. You notice, for instance, that the regime for measuring lawyers' conduct, we have what we call a general legal council. They've got a discipline committee. It's full of judges. Judges sitting at everything that lawyers do affecting discipline and so forth. But lawyers don't get opportunity. I'm talking about legal practitioners. We don't even get opportunity. They've wore themselves off with this constitutional provision about a petition to the president and so forth and so on. It's not practical enough. Given the way our court system is being run, and given the pervasive perception that judges are corrupt and whatever. I mean, even the system approving this thing, I'm not sure it's adequate enough. And it's about time, like Caesar's wife. Our judges must be above suspicion. We must be able to provide a system that would ensure that our judges can come under much serious scrutiny than they do now, because it doesn't do us good that there's a lot of perception, there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of whatever about them. I sympathize to a large extent with the way that people perceive our judges, but there's no smoke without fire. Whether we're able to go to where the source of the smoke is and nip it in the bud, or we continue with it, and it doesn't really help anybody. Doesn't help anybody.
Just to cap it all off so we can move on to other stories, are you saying, in a way, our judges have become, we've created a system where our judges are tin gods or demigods in a way? They are untouchable and sometimes they get away with things that they ought not to. Is that what you're saying?
I've said more than that. They are more than tin gods. They are more than demigods. They are more than, I mean, our judges are beyond approach and so forth and so on. I mean, that's the way I would put it. And it even reflects in the attitude of most judges, even at the lowest levels, how they treat even senior lawyers who appear before them. Some are only, I mean, now the impression is that once you become a judge, you can never even be wrong. Once you become a judge, with due respect, you are wiser than everybody who appears before the court. And some of them, they don't even treat the bar with dignity. And as a senior member of the profession, I think these are things sometimes erupts in, and it's about time that, I mean, listen, at so many levels, judges will easily preside over functions being done by lawyers, but they don't even consider themselves, they don't even consider lawyers as, I mean, proper to be involved in anything that they do. They think that every time, for instance, there's a seminar by lawyers that might be addressed by judges, but they don't even feel that even lawyers have better perspectives on the things that they do. We do the research and put it before them. A judge's duty, in my view, is much simpler than that of a lawyer. We do the research, bring it before you, at the end you make a decision, right or wrong. The other person may decide what he wants to do. So I don't even honestly believe that they should do some of the things that they do. I don't know how they form that impression. But why must judges think that they know better than a lawyer merely because they sit on the bench? These are some of the things that, I mean, does not augur well for all of us. The relationship even between the bar and the bench, it doesn't exist. I mean, once in a year, we may have what they call bar bench, seminar, and that's it. At the end of the day, they go into their corners, we also go into our corners, and they don't think that even lawyers are entitled to, I mean, relate to them in any way. Anyway, it's a much bigger problem, and I think we must all be looking at how these perceptions, how these views, I mean, will work together for all of us. But if I may summarize that point, I have said it, that our judges, most of them are behaving more like demi and tin gods, and they need to come down to the level that we well were. There's nothing that shows that a judge becomes, I mean, if you set up a committee involving the senior most lawyer in Ghana, the judge, if it's a magistrate judge or whatever, she has to chair the committee. What is that? What does that mean? I don't even understand it. Oh, I don't understand it. Maybe somebody will explain it better next time. The fact that you become a judge and everything, you must be on top. How come that be? Where did that come from?
I am totally with you on these submissions that you're making. I feel in terms of our legal framework, and sometimes I say these things on pain of victimization, let's face it. We have a strong judicial system. It is the backbone of our democracy from where I sit. But at the same time, I feel we have strayed in certain ways, even especially in terms of legal education and on so many fronts and the positions we've taken. And I think part of it also is because as a nation, our 1992 Constitution, which is not wholly bad, but badly needs some retweaking, also fetters our judges in the dispensation of law. I feel we're still too lethargic, too slow in dispensing law, like in the Developmental situation. There are myriad areas we can look at, but at least we are not faring badly, terribly. But there's a lot of work to be done. Let's make tracks. If we want to, both of us being in the legal sphere, if we want to stay here, we'll stay here forever. But more interesting stories. And the author of this piece is former colleague of mine at the University of Ghana. I didn't even know this. I just took note of it. It's on page 13. And I'll keep harping on this. I have committed this show and my presence here to fight against period poverty. The wanton taxes on sanitary pads, 35%, import and then VAT, 35%. Or most of the countries that we rub shoulders with in different ways, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, among others, have taken away taxes on sanitary products. Why are we still imposing them? There's this piece here by the author, Portia Mau Anani, who says, menstruation not by choice. Women didn't choose that at a certain point in time they would menstruate. Just to give you a teaser, I experienced my first menstrual flow in primary 6. I was 12 years old. I did not tell anybody about it, not even my mother. Frankly, I do not know why I did not tell her, but somehow I managed the flow with toilet roll. I recall sitting in class for the entire day without engaging in any activity. When I got home that day, I was relieved to see that the flow had stopped. The next time I saw another flow was in junior high school 1. It goes on and on. It's a beautiful story. You should check it out on page 13 of the newspaper. But I will keep reiterating. Women within those catchment ages do not menstruate or flow out of choice. If they had to choose to flow, and they could get pregnant and all of that without going through that, they would probably choose not to. So let's not tax them for that. Now, Information Minister commends graphic for digitizing archival materials, and then tourist arrivals surge. Let me do the one about tourism. So the country has recorded 247,834 international tourist arrivals in the first quarter of this year. It represents a 45.19% increase over the 170,696 arrivals for the same period last year. Although higher than last year's arrivals, the figure is still below the record 256,457 arrivals for the same period in 2019 during the implementation of the Year of Return. The Ghana Tourism Authority explained that the increase was influenced by arrivals from the United States of America, India, Nigeria, China, Britain, Germany, Liberia, and the Netherlands. With the growth in figures, some industry stakeholders have projected that the country would be able to meet its 1.2 million tourist arrival targets for 2023. I remember some time back doing Blunt Thoughts, and I've forgotten the country. It's a very small country. It starts with an M. I'll try to get it. It's somewhere in Europe. Very small country, and their numbers in terms of tourism even higher than our numbers. So it is my hope that we can do more in boosting tourism. There are countries that literally live on tourism, like Cuba, a place I have lived. And sometimes you look at what we're sitting on and how we're faring, going to the IMF and all of that, and you ask how sensible we are in terms of running the affairs of this country. NPP changes timelines. The New Patriotic Party has announced revised timelines for some of the activities in connection with the presidential and orphan constituencies primaries. The statement explained that the decision followed the EC's press release issued on May 31. And according to the CPP, the dreams of Kwame Nkrumah have been dashed on the back of what we are seeing today. Quick reactions, tourism, the dreams of Nkrumah dashed. Maybe before we do some international stories from the Daily Graphic and take it from there.
Well, talking about tourism, I think it's good to hear that we are increasing numbers, but having regard to Ghana's historical antecedent, I'm talking about the record of Ghana's role in independence Africa, the way Ghana features in the African American community and wherever. I thought by now we should have boosted our tourism potential, at least from that market. I'm talking about the American market in particular. I think when we started doing this business, inviting African Americans to come to Ghana and stuff, I think the way I want to put it is we need to have value added. In other words, there must be policies that will go beyond the natural affection that people have, especially from the Black community, and have policies in place that would actually be the basis and the reason for bringing them into this country. I'm not too sure that that market has properly been exploited And I think a lot needs to be done. There was talk, for instance, about giving them citizenship and so forth and so on. I remember way back in 1960, there was a constitutional provision that permitted everybody of African origin to automatic citizenship in Ghana and stuff. But I believe, having regard to those days and now, it may not be too realistic to offer direct citizenship to just everybody of African origin. But I'm saying that we must have clear policies that would be attractive to the particular community that is more attracted to us. That is the issue about tourism. All the other matters that you have mentioned, fair enough. They are okay. And I really don't want to say too much about them. We may go to the foreign news and know what else is trending elsewhere.
Right. Let's do that. I feel your pain, Tinubu, to Nigerians. And President of Nigeria, Bola Bubu Ahmed Adekunle Tinubu, Bubu is his nickname, by the way, has broken his silence on the issue of the ending of the fuel subsidy since making the announcement that it was gone when he was sworn in a fortnight ago. The decision led to a rapid rise in petrol prices. Using a speech on Nigeria's Democracy Day holiday, President Tinubu told citizens, "I feel your pain." In exchange for the ending of the subsidy, Mr. Tinubu promised he would repay Nigerians, quote, through massive investment in transportation infrastructure, education, regular power supply, healthcare, and other public utilities that will improve the quality of lives, quote. I just have this quick thought though. What is it with us Africans? Mo Ibrahim, the British Sudanese businessman, once at a forum asked, we vote all these old people, and I'm not engaging in ageism. Whenever I say this, I am clear. I'm not ageist. I'm not engaging in ageism. But where are we going as a continent, electing all of these old people, 80s, 90s? There have been people up north, Northern Africa, in wheelchairs who can't even walk, who are still contesting elections. There are people in Cameroon, in Togo, in other places, Equatorial Guinea, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years plus. Yet you look at the developmental cycle. What have they added to their countries? Where are they taking us? To the grave? So why do you feel the continent is so bedeviled with elderly leadership? Very few are young. Even look at Paul Kagame in Rwanda. We would say he's one of the young ones, but look at him, look at his age. What do you feel is driving that? And maybe you can just add your thoughts to Gambian President Adama Barrow, re-elected in 2021, who has hinted that he may run for a third term at the next election in 2026. African leaders never want to leave on time. Alassane Ouattara has extended in Cote d'Ivoire. They never want to leave when the time says they should go. They feel they have all the wisdom. They are the repository of wisdom. Yet, what are they delivering? Quick thoughts?
Yeah, if ever I have the opportunity of writing a book, I was going to write a book on the lost generation in Africa. The lost generation includes myself and includes many people. If you consider my age, and I consider myself as part of the lost generation. Why the lost generation? Contrast that present situation we have way back to the 60s. Our leaders, they all became leaders when they were very young, 23, 25, 30. Kufuor, for instance, was deputy minister of foreign affairs when he was just early 30s. Buzia, look at when he became prime minister. Look at Kwame Nkrumah when he became president. All of these people, they started to rule Africa. I'm talking about the politics of Africa and leadership. And the fact that people rose to all kinds of positions in the early days, in their teens and their mid-20s and early 30s. But you know what? My own take on this matter is that the intervention of the military in African politics showed our natural leaders way back. And what it meant is that for all the people, if I'm using Ghana specifically as an example, all these people who in their 20s and 30s, the Haruna Sekus, the Kufuors, J.H. all of them, they were relegated to the backyard or the background for so long that when the new wave of democratization came, they came and competed with the young people who ordinarily would have filled their positions. If they had run their terms of office and so forth and so on, they would naturally have gone out. But when they did not go out, they went and just stood somewhere. And then when the new wave of democratization came, they came back to compete with the people who shall fill those positions. That, for instance, in Ghana, in my analysis, shows the difference between, for instance, the NPP politics and the NDC politics. You notice that the NDC, the revolutionaries, I'm talking about people to Tobukwachi, the Chikates, all of them, they were very young men who became part of the revolution. And they stayed around so long that when the wave of democratization came, they had become, what do you call it? Astute. I wouldn't use the word astute. They had stayed long enough in politics for them to go back. And that explains, in my view, why when, for instance, President Mills came around, he decided to choose the young people, because all those people who had joined the revolution had run around long enough, and that explains. But when it comes to MPP, the Kufors, the Akufo-Addos, all of them, they have been relegated to the background, and when they came back, the young ones in the party could not compete with them. So you can look at...
But interestingly, just to make a point, though we have to wrap quickly, but just to make a point, John Ejekum Kufuor, I think it was under the Buzia regime, he had become a minister very young.
That's the point I'm making.
So he wouldn't fit that category.
No, I'm telling you that when he had become young on the Buzia, he came back, and when he came back, he did not consider the young people who were like his age when he was a minister.
Right.
That's the point I'm making.
Right.
That's the real point I'm making. So imagine, I mean, we have the facts. When Kufuor came, all the people he surrounded himself with were largely his gutter-to-gutter mates. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, that's just an aspect. But then the African psyche, even the young men who have come in, like this Adam Barrow, what is the real reason for him wanting to go for a third term? So there's a sickness in Africa that virtually very soon we have to identify what makes us do the things that we do. Is there something wrong with us? And so forth and so on. Because I can't even understand it. I mean, let me tell you, let me pay commendation. You know, Rawlings, when he decided not to contest, extend his term, I mean, there was a lot of hue and cry. I mean, there were a lot of people were saying that, listen, I mean, he could not have done otherwise. But I mean, after some time, I begin to appreciate that if he wanted, he would have got all the people in his party to urge him on. So it had to be a personal decision on his part.
Right.
That I'm not going to go on. Other than that, you got wise men in the party. Personally.
Not even Rawlings succumbed to some of these things. Some may say, yes, the Bretton Woods institutions had their influence. He could have decided to go the same way that even Democrats like Adama Barrow. And look at what is happening in Senegal. I mean, Africa, I agree with you. We have a problem with our psyche. If he wanted to run, he would have got people to push him on and urge him on. So what is it about Africans and about African leadership, about the people who surround the presidency and wherever that, they cannot look a president in the face and tell him things that he ought to hear. We are sycophants, that's it.
Sitting at Hanoi airport when he was overthrown, and the very people who were with him, they said that this man was a dictator. And then the very people, it's a sad commentary.
We have to go, but I'll just leave our viewers with these headlines. ADB in the Daily Guide. ADB fulfills pledge to Best Farmer. They gave him the 1 million Ghana cedis that they had promised. Ghanaians don't trust NDC. That's according to Mahama. And he says if the NDC will win in 2024, they must first earn the trust of Ghanaians. But that is how the Daily Guide couches it. Ghanaians don't trust NDC. Economy Times is what I'll wrap with. Job scarcity is on the rise, and businesses overwhelmed with taxes call out on government to save jobs and investments. Those are two major stories you'd like to grab a copy of the Economy Times and get into, but we all know it. Job scarcity being on the rise and businesses being overwhelmed with taxes. Nothing new. In some 10-15 seconds, any final comments as we wrap? Lawyer Paintel?
Well, job scarcity has been with us only because everybody expects the government to find a job for everybody. That's the major problem that I believe we have. And it's about time that we diversify. Individuals must also, I'm talking about individuals, even like myself. I'm a lawyer, but I give jobs to people. I open up people I employ. I mean, and so forth and so on. So let's look more at the private side of things than always expecting the Ghana government to provide jobs for everybody. The Ghana government is incapable of providing jobs for everybody. That's my final
That is true. Mr. Paintel, thank you so much for joining the conversation this morning. We wish you the very best of the day, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Kweku Paintel is a lawyer and a man who speaks his mind. Right before we go, Happy birthday to Amatamaklo, CEO of Food 101. You have been a huge blessing and truly impacted your family, friends, workers, and generation. God richly bless you for us on this special day and make you great. Cheers to you. Happy birthday to Alexander Kingsley Copson. We love you dearly and thank God for giving you to us. It's from your lovely wife, Elizabeth Millicent Copson, children, family, and friends. And belated birthday wishes to my own godson, Victor Yekple. I call you brother. You're a fantastic young man. God richly bless you and make you great and strong like Ghana. As we wrap and get into sports, Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic helped us to bring you this segment. They're offering free prostate screening, free fertility screening for women as well. Locate them here in Accra at Spintex opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi Kronomabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takwade Anaji State Tema Community 22, Tichiman Hanso and Esiama Nzema. Reach them as well via phone on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Yesterday, or should I say overnight, the Denver Nuggets became the NBA champions for the very first time with the Joker, Nikola Jokic, leading the team. That and more in sports coming your way. Do stay.
Hello, AM Sports here with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah. The Black Stars, they have begun preparations for the next African Cup of Nations qualifier. This will be against Madagascar. About 23 players reported to camp, and Gideon Mensah out of the training session, while Hafiz Konkone was asked to train alone with the physical trainer of the senior national team. My colleague Lawrence Beidou was at the Accra Sports Stadium, and he has come through with this report.
The team arrived at the Accra Sports Stadium 15 minutes after 4 in their new team bus with supporters already present to watch them train. Kamaldeen Sulemana, Ernest Nyama, and Ransford Yeboah-Konisdorfer, who were all named in the Black Meteors team for the Under-23 AFCON, joined the team's opening training session. Despite 23 players arriving at the Accra Sports Stadium, only 22 completed Monday's session, with Bechem United's Hafiz Konkone undergoing a separate session with the team's physio. After a long season, there was a need to take things slowly in the opening training session as the intensity was minimal, while there was also little ball work at the end of the day. As you can see behind me, the Black Stars of Ghana have completed their first training session ahead of the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier against Madagascar. The team opened camp on Monday, June 12, with 24 players reporting on the first day, Thomas Partey being the only player absent. However, at the Accra Sports Stadium, Gideon Mensah was unable to train with the team, with Hafiz Konkone also having to sit out after playing on the final day of the Bet Power Ghana Premier League on Sunday. George Watson led the training session at the Accra Sports Stadium with Chris Hutton watching on. The Black Stars are set to return to training on Tuesday as preparations continue for the game. Reporting for Joy Sports, Lawrence Beidou from the Accra Sports Stadium.
And the Black Meteors, they have arrived in Cairo for pre-tournament camping ahead of the Under-23 African Cup of Nations that will be happening in Morocco. Ghana is in the group of the host nations, Morocco, and they are in the group of Guinea, Congo, for that competition, which is starting on June 24. The Meteors would also be playing a couple of friendly matches, one on June 15 and the other one would be on June 19. And the Black Meteors qualified for the tournament after overcoming Algeria in the last one of the qualifying series. Having drawn 1-1 away, the Black Meteors came back to Kumasi and won the other fixture 1-0, which ensured that they were able to qualify to participate in the tournament. The Under-23 competition serves as the qualifier for Paris 2024, which is going to be the Olympics game. Ghana hasn't qualified to participate in the Olympics games since 2000. and 4 and will be seeking to end about 19 years of waiting to participate in the competition. We talk Ghana Premier League now, and President of the Ghana Football Association, Kurt Okriku, he has said that Ghana football is alive. It's a message sent to critics who claim that Ghana football is dead. He spoke to Star Times after Mediama SC were crowned Ghana Premier League champions.
Unbelievable, unbelievable, beyond my expectations. Today, we have given a firm statement that we have the passion for our sports, we have the love for our GPL, and our GPL is alive.
How would you describe the entire competition and the success of the organization of the season's Premier League?
Again, I'll start my answer by saying that trust the process. It's important all of us trust the process and believe in the process. What we have seen this season has been an amazing journey. A season that enabled all of us to enjoy football at the highest level of quality. And on the final day, everybody sat on tenterhooks until the last minutes of our game. Ghana football is alive.
And I want to find out from you about this season's Premier League and the fact that Mediama is going to represent Ghana in Africa. You think they are going to be worthy representatives of our country in Africa?
I think that over the entire duration of the competition, Mediama stood tall. They were very, very competitive. The fans stuck by the team. And what we have seen today is a testament of the endurance and their belief and trust in their team. I would say congratulations to every member of the family. They deserve it.
And they earned a place to also participate in the next edition of the CAF Champions League. There will be Ghana representatives for that competition, and president of the club, Moses Alma Parker, he has said that they are going to be good ambassadors for Ghana when the next edition of the CAF Champions League starts later this year.
You can see, we've tried several times. How many times? 3 times. Consecutive times. We were on top and COVID came. We were on top and normalization also came. We go front and back. But today, God has made it. It's our time. And the title is in Takwa. Now, this is how the world is. If you want good for yourself, there will be a lot of good and bad. Because the coaches, I was looking for a coach who will make me win the cup title. It was not coming. So I will continue pushing. And it came to a point I said, no, let me go back to my coach. No, it's a revelation. Because Adote was part of our 2 glories. Yeah. The 2 FA Cup titles. Yeah. So I decided, no, why don't we bring this man back? Then we brought him, and God has given the cup to us. And I'm sure with your new stadium about to be completed, you are going to represent Ghana big time in Africa. Very, very big. Very, very big. We are going all out. We have to bring that chance for Ghana to be on top of the Africa competition.
They are seeking to break that jinx, and Ghana is also seeking to have many representatives in the next edition of the Olympic Games, which will be happening in Paris. The Ghana Swimming Federation organized a national swimming championship that would help them select some athletes and train them ahead of the qualifiers and the participation of the competition itself. My colleague Elon Benaya Dafiamakpo was at the swimming event, which was staged at the Legon swimming facility, and he's come through with this report.
157 swimmers across the country gathered at the University of Ghana swimming court on Saturday, June 10th for the event. The event is organized once or twice every year to help select the best swimmers in the country for upcoming tournaments. According to President of the Ghana Swimming Association, Mrs. Delphina Kwe, this year's event is to help spot the best swimmers in the country for the Africa Games next year.
This competition primarily is to select our swimmers for the African Games next year. We are having this to select them because we need to get our swimmers ready and train them further to get them ready for next year's competition. The benefits of this is that, you see, all the swimmers in the country come on board And then through that, we are able to select the best out of them for future competitions, national competitions.
Chairman of the local organizing committee, Dr. Kwekwe Fosu, says the LOC is working with federation heads to prepare athletes ahead of the tournament next year.
It's really beneficial in the sense that we're going to get some of the swimmers selected for the African Games. And so at this particular point, the LOC is working with federation heads and they're organizing some of competitions like this. And today, for instance, the federation president and the executives of the Swimming Federation, Ghana Swimming Federation, they've given us every assurance that out of this competition, they will be able to get their team list and advise the LOC on that.
Swimming coach and father of Ghanaian Olympic swimmer Abiu Jackson, believes Ghanaian coaches have to think outside the box to help their swimmers get to the next level.
There are many things that we could do, but I think that what is important now is that we coaches start to think outside the box and help them to move to the next level. Anytime swimmers are going to move to the next level, it will come out of the creativity and ingenuity of the coaches. So we would have to look deep and see how we move them to the next level. In terms of facilities, yes, we come from a country that is not endowed with sports facilities. We choose not to look at what we do not have, but to maximize the little that we have. And I think that one of the things that we can maximize is the coach's own productivity and the way we bond with the swimmers to make the swimmers feel that this is the best thing that happened to them and to give off their best during training and then, of course, in competitions.
Francis Mana Ashley, who won gold in the 100-meter breaststroke in the President's Cup, which was held on April 23, said the event will help swimmers improve on their time and swimming skills.
This competition is helping us drop our times and improve on our swimming skills. So I'll say that it's good for us.
The 13th Africa Games is expected to be held in Ghana between March 8 and 23 in 2024.
Welcome back on the AM show. And of course, we continue with our conversation on that latest Hotline documentary put together by Isaac Kofi Ajay. And of course, it is Ghana, a nation that begs. We continue reflecting on the genesis of the situation and the different dynamics which explain why we are where we are currently. Our guests for this belt of the discussion, Dr. Saad Iddrisu is an economist, Louisiana Economic Development. We also have Professor Charles Aka, Senior Research Fellow at ESSA, Dr. Arthur Kobina Kennedy. He's a political activist, and Dr. Abu Sakara Foster is founder of the National Interest Movement. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. I've seen you, Dr. Abu Sakara Foster. I also see, all right, Dr. Saad Iddrisu in there, Dr. Arthur Kennedy, and of course, Professor Aka as well. Gentlemen, we're so grateful that you've taken the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prof, I have not heard, I was just listening, doing this as a bit of a mic check as well to ensure everyone's microphone is working. Prof, good morning to you.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. I can hear all of you. So here's how I want to premise the conversation for us to start. I'm sure all of us have followed the documentary piece. When you look at Ghana reflecting on how we've been begging, we have begged since independence, even before independence. We are begging, and if the foundation we have laid remains the same, if we keep building the same way, experts say we will continue to beg. But reflecting on how far we've come, our IMF flirtations, among others, what is your brief understanding of our economic situation and why we keep going back to the Bretton Woods institutions? That's the question I'll run by all of you for starters. In about a minute or two maximum, I would like your quick reflection on that before we get into other salient matters. I'll start with Professor Akka on that beat.
Okay, good morning. Am I to,
yes.
To start? Yes. So thank you very much, and good morning to all the panelists and your cherished listeners. So I think Ghana's situation is, purely the way I look at it, is not being able to put a handle on macroeconomic management and debt management strategy that is conducive for our development aspirations. Most of our years since independence we've been dependent on foreign aid. We have refused or unable to raise domestic capital to develop, and that has still been our problem after 65 years of independence. So when a country refuses to raise adequate domestic revenue, especially through taxation, but also through other fines and non-tax revenue, then the only way you can break the resource constraint is to depend on external capital. External capital comes normally from about 3 or 4 different sources. The most important one and most sustainable one is through export revenue. And again, the structure of our export and our trade has not been very sustainable, i.e. we have depended on 2 or 3 primary commodities for all these years. That does not give us adequate foreign exchange earnings in a sustainable way to develop. And the other source is through foreign direct investment. We have not built a competitive economy that is attractive to sustainable foreign capital. So the ones that we get are the greedy type, the hot money type that comes in mainly to our resource sector, oil, gold mining, and we have not even had proper capital control measures to make them sustainable and developmental. So they just come in and we don't get maximum benefit from it. And whenever there are crises, there's capital flight, they repatriate most of their capital or their profit. So that's another area which we have not managed, I think, prudentially. The third source is through remittances. And again, that's also not sustainable. There are not too many Ghanaians that remit a lot of money, even though it's been growing over time. But we don't have much from remittances in a sustainable way that will help us to industrialize and to develop our economy. So then we are left with the last...
Did I hear you say we didn't have much from remittances? Because as we have heard, even in the COVID era and even before that, we get quite a chunk of money from remittances. Is it just that you're saying it doesn't suffice on the developmental scale? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean. On the developmental scale, the needs of the country is much. If you look at the road situation, the infrastructure situation in Ghana, remittances will not solve even 5% of it. If you want to construct railroads from Takoradi to Kumasi to Tamale airports, good hospitals and good schools, and fund proper research and industrialize agriculture, remittances that we are getting in Ghana is good, but is normally procyclical. It normally increases when we have crisis. Families are sending to their relatives. So it's not, tourism has not really been developed in a way that attracts huge sums of remittances. Other countries like the Philippines and some other countries have been serious about that. I don't think we are getting so much from that area. So basically, we have now resorted to borrowing, which is the fourth channel, which is international or external borrowing. And therefore, now that we say we are a middle-income country, lower middle-income country, you will see that the aid has dropped, and then we need to borrow. In the past, we used to borrow from the multilateral sources and the Paris Club, bilateral, government to government. But in recent past, we've gone much to private capital market, private credit, and that is, for me, the most dangerous part of our borrowing or debt management strategy. And we are borrowing at high interest rate, even though they are lower than the domestic rate. But because of the exchange rate problem, when you borrow dollars at a rate of about 10%, then you need to make sure that your return to investment or that you use the funds for should exceed 10%. So, and most of the time, when we borrow this foreign currency, we use it to support the budget or to refinance existing debt. We are not really investing it in a way that will get the return in any way around even 2%. When I last checked, since the 80s, most of our borrowings gives us a return between 0.8 to 1.4%. Okay, so, and we have to pay interest of around 9, 8, 10%. So basically you have a debt problem. The returns you get from the foreign loans you have taken, you are not investing it in a sustainable, productive way that gives you more profit or more returns to be able to pay your interest or even to service your interest. That is a big challenge. And that is, for me, how I analyze our problem. It is a non-efficient way, non-prudent way of managing our debt crisis. But you know, when we look at debt sustainability, it's just dividing the total debt stock over GDP. So at the current now, we say our debt to GDP is over 100%, around that. That means that one of the sustainable ways of having a sustainable debt profile is to grow the economy. So if the economy, for example, grows sustainably at 8, 9, 7% for a decade, you will see that the debt to GDP ratio all of a sudden falls. In fact, if we grow 2023, 2024 at about 7, 8%, debt to GDP will just reduce significantly. Our GDP is almost 800 billion. So if it grows at 10%, you add another 80 billion. Okay, so that's how it is. But over time, since independence, our GDP growth has averaged just around 4%. So we are not growing seriously. We are not investing in growth sectors. And our borrowing has exceeded our growth. So again, another sustainable way is to make sure that the economy grows faster than the rate of borrowing. Anytime the rate of borrowing exceeds your rate of growth, we're going to have a crisis. So we are borrowing faster than we are growing the economy. You also have to make sure that the growth of your export is greater than the growth of your borrowing. We are borrowing faster than we are growing our export. So then it means that already, ab initio, you are going to have a debt crisis. When you borrow faster than your growth, GDP growth, you borrow faster than your export growth, and you are also borrowing and you're paying higher interest rate than your return to investment.
Okay.
Then you have a problem.
Prof, thank you so much for those initial comments. I want them to be bite-sized so we can all get a quick take and move around. So I'm going to pose that same question. I mean, I have already posed the question to the rest of you. I'll come now to Dr. Saad Iddrisu for your quick take on how far we have come, why we keep going back to the doorstep of the IMF. Quick reflections on that. Dr. Iddrisu, are you online? Can you hear me?
No? Is it okay now?
I can hear you, sir.
Yes. I've been having a problem with the connection this morning. Good morning to you and good morning to my co-panelists as well as the listeners. Ben, there was one interesting part about the documentary when I was watching. I think that was with the one that Bright presented. When you looked at the history of the IMF bailout, something pricked my mind or something drew my attention to it in the sense that when you do all the calculations with regards to how much Ghana have gotten since 1966 all the way till now, it's about 3 billion. It's not even up to 4 billion in that analysis. Then all of a sudden, the country is going to take a 3 billion loan credit facility. I'm bringing this to explain the fact that it seems our constitution in general, the Ghanaian constitution, has given room to governments to borrow anyhow they like. You know, when you have a constitution that doesn't have a limit, and I don't want to say the president, but the government in power could do anything at all they like, we are going to have debt crisis like this. Not just the current government, but even if you go back to look at all the previous data. Now, aside just the IMF bailout, come to the public debt itself. Look at the monetary policy report of Bank of Ghana. That's the January monetary policy report, January 2017. It's reported that as of November 2016, our total public debt stock was $30.1 billion. As at December 2022, it ballooned, it more than doubled to $63.3 billion. That is what is reported in the IMF report. So what does it tell you? Looking at this small data or looking at this comparison, it's telling you that we have a constitution that gives power to whoever is in office to do anything at all they like. And at that point in time, God forbid, if we have the case of Idi Amin, who can borrow up to $1 billion, they will definitely do that. And they will be within the legal limits of the law. They are not breaking any law, but they are putting the country in a debt crisis, but it's still legal. So when you are a growing nation, especially like an African nation, you don't make laws with so much loopholes that people in power could take advantage of. When people go on reckless borrowing to put the whole nation in a debt crisis, they are still within the legal framework. They are not breaking any law, but the nation is suffering. So that is one of the problems Ghana has been facing, I would say, since independence. The fact that we haven't been able to put a debt limit, a debt ceiling, or a debt cap on borrowing, so that we could show that if a government comes to power, at least we are giving you 10 billion to borrow, or we are giving you, okay, whatever the total debt stock is currently, you have an advantage to borrow at least 40% of that, 50% of that. Whatever that we as a country decides to do, I think it will prevent future recklessness of finance ministers.
Quick thought, Dr. Iddrisu. Is that practical? Look at the United States, for example. They have their debt ceiling. In recent times, the Republicans have had to play ball with the Democrats just so that debt ceiling can be increased or pushed further up, just so there will not be chaos. Even the United States, with its, 30 plus trillion in debt. So how do you expect a country like Ghana, which is not even there, to be able to accommodate that?
That is what I was just coming to, because this particular issue that I'm bringing up, I brought it up on March 31st, 2022. That was last year, even before we got into this situation. When I analyzed the Bank of Ghana report and I saw the reckless borrowing that was going on, I raised this issue of March. I even sent it to your producers. I'm not sure if they will be able to put it on the screen right now for viewers to see. But you see, when I raised it, even at that time, the argument was that United States itself is suffering from that. United States, with their over 200 years of democracy, even still has a debt ceiling, which has just recently become an issue for discussion between the Republicans and the Democrats. Why will their democracy with over 200 years, why would they even have something like that in place? It's telling you that you cannot put powers in the hands of people and just expect them to do anything. They will do beyond what you even expect them to do. You understand? And again, Ben, the mistakes we Africans or the mistake we developing countries make is to always do what the textbook tells us. I believe it is high time our economists, I believe it is high time our policymakers shifts away from some of these theoretical economics and think outside the box for solutions that will be practical to our situation. So even if the whole world, no one is putting a debt ceiling, even if the whole world, no one is telling its government, okay, we are giving you 10 billion for the whole 8 years or for the whole term that you are in, at least Ghana could be an example. Because the figures that we are looking at, right, if we can go as a country from $30 billion in 2016, just in 7 years, we have doubled our national debts. So tell me, what can't any government do again, Ben?
All right.
So for instance, if President John Mahama comes in 2025 and decides that, okay, I'm doing 4 years, I want to borrow 100 billion. Is there any law to stop him? There isn't any law to stop him. If the finance minister comes and says that, okay, we can borrow 100 or 200 billion, there is no law to stop him. So at the end of the day, within that short period, they can borrow as much as they want. But you and I know that whatever that is borrowed within that short period, there isn't no value for money because we are seeing it right now. If there was value for money for all the borrowing that has happened, we wouldn't even go back to IMF because this current data that you are looking at, it tells you that the government has had enough resources. So my whole point is that we should start reflecting as a nation. Do we want to really put a cap on our leaders so that we wouldn't have Idi Amin coming into power to take advantage of the constitution, so that we wouldn't emburden the future generations with so much debt that they will still be in debt crisis? Because as at now, even with the IMF bailout and all that, if you look at the IMF own projections on page 35 of its report, we will still be in a debt crisis even as far as 2027. Even when the program is ending in 2025, our debt to GDP will be about 90.2. They are IMF own projections. So it's telling you that our debt situation is self-imposed. Let me put it that way.
Right.
Until we are able to put a cap, right, and limit on how much government borrows, government will not focus its attention on local generation of revenue. You see, I don't want to use the term laziness, but over the years, that is what it has turned governments into. Because, I mean, borrowing becomes the easiest way of raising revenue. So their attention is not actually on the domestic economy, how to be able to generate the economy, how to be able to stimulate the economy, so that the economy itself can provide enough revenue to support government projects. So the only thing that they have to do is to go out and borrow. When they go out and borrow, they come, implement projects, go back again and borrow. So they are not even watching enough to see even if the projects are generating any value to be able to pay for itself.
All right.
But if we start putting in that cap, right, believe me, we are going to bring government attention onto the domestic economy. Governments upon government will now start looking locally how to be able to stimulate sectors of the economy so that they will be able to generate revenue on its own.
Okay.
So doing that, we'll be able to even increase our imports.
Let me have you pause there and bring in Dr. Arthur Kennedy for his take before I bring in Dr. Busakara Foster. Dr. Arthur Kennedy, you've also followed our trajectory. You've lived longer than most of us. You've been there, done that. You're with the ruling administration. Why do you think we keep falling into this hole with the IMF? And when President Mahama said sometime in during his tenure, it had to be the last, around 2017, it had to be the last of IMF forays. But here we are again, back even before that time. What is your take? What is your reflection?
Yeah, good morning to your eminent panel and to my fellow Ghanaians. I think that most of the points that have been made are on point. First, our problem is expenditures versus revenue. The truth of the matter is, as others have pointed out, we don't raise enough revenue from taxes. And I think that our governments have discovered that it is easier to just borrow and spend than to tax and spend, because when you tax people, they ask questions. And when you go and borrow, it is really easy money and posterity will pay it. So we don't worry about it. I think at the root of this, it's not a crisis in the sense that, like all individuals, we must live within our means. When we say we must live within our means, it means that we should control government expenditure. That's the first thing we don't do. The size of our government is too bloated. We should not be having the size of government we have given our limited resources. We should live humbly. That is from our president to all our ministers. But more to the point, even when we borrow, our spending decisions are not made soundly. We waste a lot of money. Actually, when you look at Tony Blair's African report, they said that 25% of our procurement decisions are affected by corruption. It means that the money that we are borrowing is not all going to what we ought to be using them to do: good infrastructure, electricity, investing in people so that we get educated, productive people. We're not doing all those things. So at the end of the day, we don't even use the money that we borrow well. I know that one of the panelists said diaspora remittances is a pittance, but the fact of the matter is that just
that was
like
Professor
foreign
Aka.
direct investment, diaspora remittances also respond to good economic management. It has to be an attractive place so that when people remit their money, they can have good places to invest them, which will create jobs so that the private economy will grow. As one of the panelists pointed out, when the economy is growing, then the debt to GDP ratio gets better. So basically, if you ask me to sum it up, it boils down to we ought to spend less. Our governments need to be more accountable and smaller. We need to make better spending decisions. There needs to be less corruption. There needs to be transparency. And when we talk about the lack of controls, it's not that we don't have laws. It is just that the laws are not being enforced. I think Parliament ought to be doing executive oversight. All these loans are approved by the People's Parliament. So if they are approving all these debts and we think the debts are too much, then obviously something is happening somewhere. For example, since the beginning of the Fourth Republic, almost every government has embarked on a public housing project. It goes on for some time, they get it to 80, 90%, then they abandon it. And the next government comes, it goes to look for new revenue, it builds a public housing project, it gets to a certain stage, then they abandon it. And of course, if you are doing public procurement and 25% of it is due to corruption, and we saw what happened with the director of the Public Procurement Authority, forming a company and looting the public resources. I think the problem we have, in addition to not collecting enough resources, is that a lot of the aid money really is directed into private pockets to enrich private individuals who are serving at their own behest instead of at the public interest. And if we want to do something, we need to tackle that. And we also need to broaden the tax base so that more people will pay taxes so we raise more domestic revenue. And one of the things that one of the panelists says that is true is that we need to make sure that all these people investing in mining and other sectors don't just come here, invest and repatriate their profits. We need to find a way of keeping more of their profits here. And we need to, of course, open up spaces like tourism so that more people from outside will come here, look at our history, look at our castles and others and spend money. Even Canada, former Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said that in terms of return on investment, tourism is one of the best areas that one can look at. And we need to stop boneheaded policies like a national cathedral when we are broke. That is a symbol of irresponsible government, if ever there was one. So these are the problems that exist, and no nation has ever borrowed its way into prosperity.
Interesting points made. Dr. Foster, for you, this trajectory, how have we ended up here, and what are the dynamics you see? Hello, Dr. Abusakara Foster.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to my co-panelists. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to interact with you all. I think the first thing is that we must say the blunt truth as it is. Business cannot carry on as usual. We've borrowed up to the point where we're at the end of a precipice. The world has changed. We just can't keep on borrowing. And we've got to the end. And the next government in 2025 is going to be faced with very serious challenges. This fact must be known to everybody. So we can't even pretend that just because we've got this 3 billion, things are going to be smoothed over and life is going to carry on as usual, because that is still working in the mentality that we can keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. We've borrowed from low to middle income status. Now we expect that we will borrow from middle income status to high income status. And where does that take us? Because at the end of the day, something has to give. And we cannot compare ourselves to places like America and what have you. They have a big industrial base. They have big geopolitical control where they can, use influences around the world to assist their economy. So all of Africa, you're 3.5% of the total global trade. You're just a speck on the wall. So you don't have those influences. You don't have that, size of economy to be able to go through those kinds of challenges that they have with their big, debt ceilings. So we have to come to some basic understanding of where we stand right now. And I think all the presenters, without exception, have painted the picture graphically and in detail. And there's no argument with anybody. We've got to cut our coat according to our size. The question is, where are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And how are you going to do it? Those are the issues that we now must face. Because at the end of the day, we can't say that this happened by accident. It was a deliberate choice. We took that choice to borrow this amount of money and balloon the debt beyond what it should be, because we thought through that we were going to get some, sudden change in the entire economy. It was a miscalculation because, of course, nobody knew COVID was coming along. Nobody knew Ukraine war was coming along. But all the same, that's why one should be always cautious and you don't overdo things where you cannot retrieve your position. So at the end of the day, we are where we are now because we made a gross miscalculation in the amount we should have borrowed and how we borrowed it at that time. Now we're in the grip of our debtors. And let's not forget, the debt situation is not just about making money. It's really about controlling the way your country grows in order that it will favor those people who lend you that money and their investors. What has been the most significant effect of our borrowing since we started this journey of ours in Ghana? The most significant effect has been that it has stripped us of all our national industries because they've been privatized. And now we're on a, what I'll say, shopkeeper's economy, where we're just trading, selling, and buying things. We still have our, small revenue from extractive resources, etc. But it is way below what we need to meet our public sector payments. So if you don't have that, and those initial investments, those initial outlays you made in industry, etc., which would have generated money, we don't have that as well. And then we're having imposed on us very high taxation, very high cost of energy, very high transaction costs. It's like running on a treadmill, which is can run faster than you. You will run and run and run. When you get tired, it will kick you off. That's the bottom line. So we shouldn't have any illusion that we'll be able to keep running on this dead treadmill and then we'll make ground and gain ground. No, that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen.
Right.
So at some stage, we have to stop, take stock, and say, look, let's cut our coat according to our size. Let's look at we're not saying we're not going to borrow money, but let's look at how we borrow money. Let us have a national development plan in segments. And within that segment, it tells you what you can borrow that money for and how much you should borrow that money for. We have steadfastly refused to have such a plan and believe in manifestos, which we make ad hoc according to what our electoral promises say. And then we want to rule government by that. Anybody who has made progress has always had a plan. And they don't rule their country according to manifestos. If they're manifestos, they're about how you execute that plan, which is predetermined, and how you cost it to make sure you're doing it cost effectively. It's not about plucking promises from the sky and vote-winning promises, which you know very well are going to land you into trouble at the end of the day. And nothing's changing. Begin looking at the campaign promises as we go into 2024. You'll see whether we have learned anything or not.
Interesting thoughts. And that final point you made about going into 2024 and what we ought to be looking at, I will bring to all of you at the end of this conversation. But coming to you, Professor Aka, you look at the fact that we got debt forgiveness to the tune of about $6 billion during John Agyekum Kufuor's time. I'm talking about HIPIC. We were declared a highly indebted poor country. Some say we are even in a worse situation, in an even worse situation now. But is there any justification on the back of the early 2000s, around 2004, and the assistance we got? We were the second, if you look at the rank of countries, in terms of our debt forgiveness vis-a-vis our gross domestic product. Yet, just a few years down that road, we went begging the IMF again. Almost every 4 to 6 years, we go back to the IMF. Are we justified, or are we just led by mismanagers? What is your take?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the truth of the matter, and I think Dr. Abu Zakara said it, it's time for us to begin to speak the truth to ourselves. That, to be honest with you, since the 1960s, since the overthrow of President Kwame Nkrumah, I think we have had very bad governance. And I'm worried about that. I'm not even much concerned about our generation and our time. Many of us are getting old. But I'm concerned about our children and grandchildren, and we don't seem to be doing anything serious that will give them hope. Many people talk to me, in fact, in the last 2 years since the crisis began. I've had students, teaching the university, asking whether there's hope in Ghana. And everybody wants to leave the country. Many people I've spoken to. People are already trying to get Canadian citizenship and other things. Doctors and professionals are leaving. I have many colleagues who refuse to come back to Ghana when I made a choice to come. So, and I don't think it's good. Much of our politics has been irrational and capricious and corruption and mismanagement. And I think that's what has brought us here. And that's the truth of the matter. And you can trace back. So if you go back to 1960, Ghana was better off than Malaysia and South Korea, for example, or at par in terms of GDP per capita. And see where Malaysia and South Korea are now. Okay, Malaysia is it's an upper middle income country. GDP per capita is close to $12,000 per capita. They are aiming in the next, by 2030, to be a high income country. South Korea is already a high income country. And GDP per capita is above $30,000. Okay. And Ghana, we are still GDP per capita less than $2,500. And over the last 65 years, the things Malaysia has done, the things South Korea has done, in terms of macroeconomic management, industrialization, infrastructure, we have come nowhere near that. So we need to question ourselves, what kind of people are we voting into power? And what are the checks and balances? And sometimes I blame we, the voters, as we are part of it. We are talking about elections. This democracy, it has failed. We are talking about...
Are you suggesting our brand of democracy has failed, or democracy in itself is not out? I mean, let's get into the conversation of whether democracy is even good for us. And I know this is a tricky conversation. Democracy vis-a-vis what other things may exist. Rwanda, Singapore may come to mind, but is democracy working for us? Is it the way to go in Ghana?
It's the way to go, but it's not working at the moment because the institutions are failed. You know, when Obama came here, he said, what Africa needs is strong institutions. You know, a book that was written by some of the economists, Asimeglu and co. So institutions. So we need to look at all our economic institutions, our governance institutions, start from the central bank, come to the parliament, come to the Council of State, come to the fiscal institution, Minister of Finance, and look at all our institutions, look at our state-owned enterprises, and see whether they are performing. And look at even civil society organizations, whether they are checking government. Look at the special prosecutor. Look at all of that, judiciary. Are they doing what they are supposed to do? You see, if you look at our constitution, under the directive principles of state policy, economic objective, section 36, the state shall take all necessary action to ensure that the national economy is managed in such a manner as to maximize the rate of economic development and to secure the maximum welfare, freedom, and happiness of every person in Ghana, and to provide adequate means of livelihood and sustainable employment and public assistance to the needy. Are we doing that? We have a state over the last 65 years that maximize the rate of economic development and secure maximum welfare and freedom and happiness of every person. We have youth unemployment is about 33%. Every 10 youth you see, almost 4 of them are unemployed. I have graduate students with first class who have graduated from economics, business administration, 5-7 years, no job.
And even for those who get work, there is underemployment. In other words, the person studied something, but what they are having to do is very far from what they studied.
So we need to ask our question, over these last 65 years, are we even following the Constitution? That how do we hold government, the state, accountable to raise enough resources domestically and even to borrow prudentially, externally, that they invest in the economy to give hope to our children, our grandchildren, so that they can have hope. You cannot have a situation like that where people are easily going to government. I have, university professors now are getting into politics. People have just realized that if you want to make it in Ghana, you must join them. Okay, so because even if you're a university professor, the state is not ensuring that it's paying you adequately or even giving research. See, I've been a researcher and a lecturer in the University of Ghana since 2007. Ask over the last 15, 16 years, how much has the state given me to conduct research? Almost every research I've conducted has to be funded by international donors. I have to write research proposal and get grant from foreign government. The government give research grant, or what they call book and research allowance, less than $2,000 a year for research for professors in the university, public university. What are they going to do with that? Even the research that is conducted is never used. So I think that we have a fundamental problem, and I think there's a political economy problem. Economic is not enough to solve it. Our politics and our governance is too capricious, is too irrational, illogical, and I think it's just self-serving. And we need to look at the Constitution and have a second look at our institutions of governance and whether they are fit for purpose, and whether the Parliament is properly doing their work of checking the executive. Now it has just become politics, NDC, MPP, and I don't think it's helping us at all. For me, that's where I am. But when you come back to asking for law, I think my colleague was saying that we need law to regulate borrowing, and I support that. But I think that...
Do you also support a debt ceiling? Do you support a debt ceiling?
I support a debt ceiling, but I think we should start from external debt ceiling, not domestic. Because, yes, the domestic, like TBs, for example, will still be needed for short-term management. But at any point, we can set a ceiling of maybe 70% per GDP. But what has caused our problem since independence has not been over borrowing from domestic resources. When government borrow domestically, they can almost always pay it in several ways, and it's not a problem. The worst case scenario is through printing money. And that has not been, our crisis we have had has always been a balance of payment problem. It has always been our inability to raise enough foreign exchange to service our foreign exchange obligations. So that's where the problem is. It is mainly because we borrow too much externally and we don't raise enough external revenue in terms of export or revenue or remittances or foreign direct investment to service the debt. If you look at the crisis we're having now, in fact, the domestic debt exchange was almost totally unnecessary. It was because the IMF demanded it, because we needed to go to do external debt restructuring. And
so quickly on this point, you're saying we should focus in terms of a debt ceiling on the external, not local debt. But how about borrowing, for example, from the central bank? That in itself is also a thorny situation. Just addressing that, how should we approach it moving forward? Just wrap on that, and then I'll bring in Dr. Iddrisu.
Okay. I'm of the view, I've spoken at length on that matter of the central bank financing, and I will write upon it again. I am of the view, you see, the textbook situation is that central bank financing or money printing leads to inflation. And I said, no, it's not true, it's a myth. And it also depends on the conditions and what the borrowing is used for. There's no country, in fact, even from Britain to the US currently, and to all the Asian countries that developed and industrialized, and the central bank did not finance massively or was not involved. So, and if you look at our records, and I can show you, if there was time, I would have shown you a graph and an analysis I've done. The causes of inflation in Ghana has not mainly been central bank financing or what they call fiscal dominance or monetary dominance. It has not been. It has mainly been because our inflation is lack of agriculture. Inflation is mainly food inflation in Ghana and mainly imported inflation. So when we failed, and I thought Dr. Abu Zakara will speak upon that because he's one of the respected people I thought when he was campaigning to become president, had some good ideas on agriculture. There's no way Ghana will develop if we don't come back to invest massively in agriculture and through agriculture to solve our food needs and to be self-sufficient in food, because that's what will control inflation. And then we will stop importing poultry and rice and many of the things, tomatoes and things that we import into this country. That is one of the first places to start our development. That's where our problem is coming from. We are using scarce resources in importing food that should have been produced in this country. We have paid lip service to agriculture. So if we got central bank, for example, to let's say give government, we have to have a bipartisan agreement. NDC, MPP, central bank, we have a National Development Planning Commission sit down. We say we will need, let's say, 10 billion Ghana cedi, 50 billion Ghana cedi to industrialize agriculture, labor-intensive agriculture. And we get that money from the central bank and we invest it into oil palm, into cocoa, into rice, into poultry. I don't see how that causes inflation. It doesn't make sense to me. If it's not going to lead to import and it's not going to be used to support the budget or to give people to buy V8 and things, and it's going to solve, food crisis problem and to industrialize the rural economy, that should actually, in the medium to long term, solve our inflation problem. It will keep inflation at less than 5-6%. And that's what Korea did. That's what Japan did. That's what Malaysia did. If you go to Malaysia, you drive through everywhere in Malaysia. In fact, when you are in the air, you will see oil palm tree all over the country. They make more money from oil palm than cocoa. In fact, they have stopped cocoa. Oil palm or palm oil is a whole factory and industry.
But again, from the developmental angle, I'll have to take you. You know why oil palm production is also in some places inhibited or controlled? Because it is sort of an invasive species, so to speak. In the sense that when people start cultivating oil palm, everything else goes. And the fear is that if you overdo oil palm, the cocoa industry, for example, could suffer. It could go under. I'm sure you're well aware of that as well, which is why the oil palm situation is a bit tricky. In those countries you reference, they have faced similar problems.
No, it's a choice. It's a development choice. They saw that oil palm is more profitable than cocoa. So they substituted oil palm for cocoa. And they have built a whole industry. In fact, if you look at just Google Malaysia and see how much export revenue they get from the oil palm sector, it's massive. It's more than we get from gold, cocoa, oil in Ghana. So there's no need for us to stick to cocoa, which is collapsing anyway. We are not investing in cocoa. What is Cocoa Board doing? How much fertilizer? What are they doing to the cocoa farmers? We have not reached our target. We can't have 2 million tons. Cocoa farmers are poor, and now they are going to, Galamsey is destroying the whole cocoa. So I don't see the argument. We need agriculture. If it's not oil palm and it's cocoa, fine. But we need to invest in cocoa, process the cocoa to make sure that we get enough export revenue from it. If it's not cocoa and it's soybean or is whatever agricultural product, what I'm saying is that we need to solve our great problem. It's fundamental. A country that cannot feed itself, they have to import everything or most of the things they consume, cannot develop. And agriculture is the place to industrialize. Industrialization must be based on agro-industrialization. And it will never be private sector alone. It needs to be the risk, which means that the government needs to take the lead. The government must be entrepreneurial. It must be state that also goes in to provide. Look at loans. How can you borrow at 30-40% to do farming? Go to my village. They take loans of almost 40%. Farmers take loans of almost 40% from the rural bank.
Right.
And then they're supposed to pay that in 1 year. Can never do that. They don't do that in the US. They don't do that in Canada. Go and check Saskatchewan. So you borrow at almost 0% or 0.5%, 1%. And then you have about 5-10 years to pay. That's how we take serious industrialization programs.
And I couldn't agree with you more, especially roping in the National Development Planning Commission. But Dr. Iddrisu, look at our interesting picture as a country. It's befuddling. So we've made ourselves international beggars. We are the typical fool surrounded by water, yet thirsty. We are now the #1 gold producer in Africa, and some would say by extension, looking at our production globally. We've ousted South Africa, which took over in 2021. We're the #2 world leading producer for cocoa. In fact, about a year ago, I don't know about currently, but we were the #1 exporter of yam anywhere in the world. The trajectory shows that we have what it takes. Natural resources, population, and a working population. I'm talking labor here. So we have the tools for industrialization. We have the manganese and bauxite that will be used in the steel industry for rapid industrialization. We have timber. Of course, Galamsey is also playing its negative role. Diamonds, oil, lithium. We have everything. So my questions then to you. Why do we still beg? Why have we not broken the cycle of begging? How do we get out? Dr. Iddrisu. Is Dr. Saad Iddrisu with us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying that to be able to do that, we need to revisit what I was emphasizing on. You see, we haven't developed our laws enough to be able to hold leaders accountable. And when you have such loose laws, believe me, anybody at all that you put in there, at the end, will end up being corrupt. At the end, will end up doing what you least expect that they will even do. So that is why I'm telling you that if you go back to look at all our borrowing history, we've had HIPAC that, were forgiven through the debt swaps and all that, but still we ended up back again in the debt crisis. So it tells you that until we are able to put a cap on borrowing, and Ben, I don't want to even take it as the American system. We can design a total different system. That is why I said I have been talking about this excessive borrowing since March last year, 2022, that we should stop it. We should put a limit on borrowing. That is the only way that we'll be able to focus on the domestic economy. By looking at our gold, by looking at our cocoa, because currently what we have is that we have all these natural resources, but at the end of the day, the revenue doesn't even stay in Ghana. How many Ghanaian companies, local companies, are actually into our gold mining, into our oil production? That is the question that we should ask. So if you have all these industries, that at the end of the day, they are only capital flies. You can never develop your domestic economy. You always resort to borrowing. See, the textbook economics will tell you that you should borrow or you should be able to raise taxes. All the time, raise taxes. We have raised taxes to cripple businesses in Ghana. Right now, businesses are moving to Cote d'Ivoire and neighboring countries, waiting for the next government to come in 2025 and they will come back. We have crippled our own savings system with too much taxes on government employees, because basically they pay most of the taxes, to the point that they are not even able to save enough to be able to think of even doing something meaningful with them. That is why I said these are all textbook economics. Do Saudi Arabia tax its citizens? Do they even have income tax in Saudi Arabia? Do they even have sales tax? Qatar, Dubai, UAE, do they even have sales tax or income tax? So we have to look into our local economy and see how to move away from just the textbook or the theoretical economics, what they are telling us to do. Because if taxes are so good, Dubai, Qatar, all these Middle East countries, or all these Arabian countries, they will have imposed taxes on their citizens.
So two angles to look at. Sorry for intervening in your train of thought.
I'm not saying taxes is not good. Let me be frank, because as an economist, I believe in taxes, but over taxation will end up crippling the economy. That is why I said we have to really move away from theory into practice. Let's not look at what the textbook is telling us to do. Let's look at our local economy. Because Malaysia didn't develop by going through the textbook scenario, borrow taxes. Saudi Arabia is not doing that. Qatar is not doing that, right? And all the resources that you have, been counting, they have it too. How have they been able to manage their oil revenue such that you and I will even want to go to Dubai and do our shopping because it's tax-free? Why can't we have such a system? So it tells you that until we are able to stop our leaders from excessive borrowing, they will never put their attention on the domestic economy. And again, there's something interesting about, especially like the IMF bailout. Observe something. In 1999, we took 300 million, right? Towards 2000, which was an election year. Then if you come back again, 2003, we went back to IMF and took 244.7. 24 was an election year. Is that not it?
Right.
2015, we went and we took 900 million. Then 2016 was an election year. Now, 2023, we are seeking 3 billion, and 2024 is going to be an election year. So there is it's like we are not really borrowing to stabilize the economy. We are borrowing for an election purposes. Let's be straightforward with that.
Okay.
And believe me, 2024 election, mark it on the wall. There will be more money in the system. Just mark it on the wall. And NDC is not going to have it easy with MPP. Because whatever funds coming in is purposely geared towards election. I will say it plain and simple. Because that has been the trend of our IMF bailout since 1999 all the way to date. You understand? So if we don't go back to the laws, the root cause, whereby we can say that, hey, you cannot come in as a government and do whatever you want with our future. Because at the end of the day, if the government decides to double our national debts in 7 years, if a government decides to double or triple our national debts in 4 years, they will live with their family rich. But your generation, our grandchildren, my grandchildren, our kids, they will suffer the impact. So whilst children in Malaysia will grow up to a beautiful economy, our children or our grandchildren will grow up in a debt crisis economy where unemployment will thrive. And again, as Prof rightly said, I totally agree with agriculture. Believe me, we can't move forward until we are able to feed ourselves. You cannot attain economic sovereignty on hunger. That is never done.
Right.
You cannot attain economic sovereignty on other people's food. That is food import. That is never done. Look at even US. Even US, the textbook, they tell you that US doesn't subsidize their farmers. But they do. They have different ways of doing it. So why would they come to Ghana and tell us that we should remove subsidies for our farmers? Then we will go by what they say.
Again, I guess the point of just following hook, line, and sinker, what is profit for us, without contextualizing.
Exactly.
Right.
Because whoever that feeds you definitely controls you.
Right. Let me just let you pause there. Hold your horses. Let me bring in Dr. Arthur Kennedy for this is the penultimate batch. Once we are done, once I do Dr. Kennedy and Dr. Foster, then I'll go to the final question, which will run across for all of you, and then we'll cap off the conversation. But some messages coming through. This one is from Junior, who says, Joy News, I want his social media handle. That is Professor Charles Akka. I want to start following him. So, Professor Akka, when I come to you later, you can give us your social media handles. If you're on social media, someone wants to follow you. But Ankida Punabantu says, the problem is government budgets are always running into deficit. What is needed are budget surpluses and pumping those surpluses as low-interest concessionary loans for the private sector to use. Makes some sense. Are budgeting and always overshooting it. Of course, if you have 1 CD every year, or if you earn 1 CD and you're spending 2 CDs, it means the extra money must come from somewhere. It means you're also going to be always fettered to indebtedness. But to you, Dr. Kennedy, your administration, the party to which you belong, before coming into power, the vice president now said they were going to move from taxation to production. And we hailed that because that was the way to go. But today, even sanitary products, and I'll keep mentioning this till the taxes on sanitary products are lifted. Sanitary products attract about 35% in taxes. We are taxing periods. Today, there's a story in the Daily Graphic about that same incident. We're taxing periods, menstruation not by choice. And we're considering it a luxury, actually, 35%. Import tax, VAT, Kenya has done away with it. Nigeria has done away with it. Rwanda, other countries have done away with it. We still impose these taxes. So then from that end, how do we actually get to production and move away from what Dr. Saad Iddrisu calls over-taxation? How do we get there? What's your thinking?
Well, taxing sanitary products is bogus economics.
You say it's what? Bogus economics.
It's bogus economics. We shouldn't be taxing that. To comment on some of the things said, though, the U.S. has a debt ceiling, but they breach it repeatedly. Actually, the debate we just saw was a debate about raising the debt ceiling. So if the Republicans had not been there, every Democrat would have voted for it and would have gone along. So it means that checks and balances are important. And the U.S., of course, has agricultural subsidies. They brag about it. Senators and congressmen from farm states brag about how much subsidies they bring to their farmers. So when we are listening to them, we should also people who pay taxes in Ghana are paying too much. We need to lower the tax rates and broaden the tax base. I think that's what our problem is. We need to tax people less and tax more people, bring more people in the informal economy into the formal economy so we can raise more revenue. I think the comment on agriculture is right on point. Actually, it was said in about 2005 by the Blair Commission that at that time, Africa was spending about $50 billion a year importing food, and now it's gotten to about 60, getting to 65. So certainly, domestic agriculture is very important, and that goes to effective governance, that we should invest in agriculture, and it's not just pumping money into it. Usu Efria Kutu brags about how much money they pumped into agri, and we can find the money. So it's not just pumping money into it, to be responsibly pumping and having accountability. Good governance is at the heart of everything. And when Obama said we need strong institutions, yes, he was right, but strong institutions don't come on their own. They are built. Munez said that nothing is possible without strong institutions, but you need strong individuals to build the strong institutions so that when they become strong enough, then they can overcome individuals who will lead us astray. I think the fundamental problem we have is bad governance. Governments that are too big, governments that are too corrupt, governments that have the wrong priorities. And I agree with you, we're heading into 2024, there's going to be more spending, we're going to have larger budget deficits, and we'll be on our way to the next IMF place with our cap in hand, begging for more things. I think we should embrace the diasporans, treat them better, reform our economy so more of them will bring resources in. We should tighten our belt, and we should hold our politicians accountable. We have seen the enemy, and he is us because we vote for them. So we cannot vote for them to do what they are doing and then turn around and complain. All this money they spend during election years, they spend them trying to bribe us. So they borrow in our name, they come bribe us, we vote for them, they go into office, they loot our resources, and then before we turn around, we're going back to begging once again. So we have seen the enemy and he is us. If we're going to do something, we need all to stand up and hold the governments accountable, both MPP and NDC. They have failed us. Parliament is not working. Everybody knows that. The judiciary is not working. They have become an effective enforcement tool for the government. Those fighting corruption are being victimized with the full cooperation of the judiciary. Before we move forward, we need accountability.
Let me bring in Dr. Abu Sakara Foster. When you give your take on this, then I'll take the final word from each one of you in about a minute, and it's a wrap to the conversation. Dr. Foster, so how far we've got now, we have been talking about the economy from different facets, but How about the spin-off or the knock-off effect of previous administrations? Recently, the World Bank country director was talking about the fact that some of those power purchase agreements of the erstwhile Mahama administration had also led to some great cost to our country and knocked the economy. The minority has come out forcefully against that, with making quite a bit of sense. But looking at the different dynamics, what is your take on that? Especially as now we're being told that what was deemed as excess capacity up to 2021, now we don't even have excess capacity anymore. Now we're going to need more capacity because guess what? Like Nkrumah did, he planned for much more capacity when our population was around 5-point-something million, almost 6 million. And that is what Akosombo still serves us with over 30 million people. Doomsaw is looming large. The energy people, power people are saying that if we don't get things right with the IPPs, independent power producers, and even get more on board, we could get back to that point. Why am I putting all this together? Because those things have a way of knocking our economy. Imagine having to go get more independent power producers at more cost, impacting our economy even more in the coming years. What is your take on that angle? How do we deal with it?
Well, you've asked me, so I'll speak to it, although I wanted to speak to some of the other issues that people raised, but I'll speak to this
So maybe
first.
in the final point I'll give you, right after this batch, the final bit you can address.
Okay. I think the first thing is that don't take everything that the World Bank says as gospel truth. If you go around the World Bank's history all over Africa, you will find plenty cases where they've always advised governments against doing that. And finally, those governments who refused and went ahead and did it, Tazara Railways from Mombasa all the way down became the lifeline of the East and Southern African countries, and yet they said it shouldn't be done. Our own Akosombo Dam was said, no, it's too bad, an ambitious project, it shouldn't be done, but it became our lifeline. So what you have to understand is that you are wanting to break out of a stranglehold and develop at your own pace. Other institutions, they will want you to keep developing, but perhaps not at the pace you want to develop, so that you don't break out. It's as simple as that. So if you keep taking that medicine, it will be like Delilah shaving Samson's hair.
Are you suggesting the
time.
IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions are in themselves some sort of trap?
Of course they are. I mean, they are a bank. What does a bank do? Are you with me?
Yeah.
They're a bank. They have their vested interests. And, you know, all the privatization that we have had done and sold off our state assets, who has come to buy those state assets? Invariably, it's their own companies that have come back to pick them up. And why is it that they're always so concerned when their competitors are getting into our economies? If the Chinese are coming in here, they're building that, you mustn't be dealing with the Chinese. But if their companies are doing it, that's okay. I'm not suggesting that we go with one or the other. All I'm telling you is that look after your own interests and follow your own plan for the rate at which you want to grow. And that means you have to begin looking at the fundamentals and investing to create a firm foundation for growth. You can't grow out in the air over there. Which brings me to a key point that I want to make regards from Kufuor's time when we had that debt forgiveness. You know, the most important part about the debt forgiveness was not the quantum of debt forgiven. It was what was done with the money that was forgiven, because the terms of that debt forgiveness required that money to be pumped into rural areas and invested in infrastructure and projects that raise the standard of living. And that is why up till today, a lot of people recognize that era as one of the best eras after the Nkrumah era, because everybody was feeling the growth from the bottom up. Now, come back to the era where now we're looking at the explosion of this debt and the alternatives that we had. We were just finding oil. You know that most of our problems came when we found oil. As soon as we found that oil, people thought that, oh, now we can borrow to the hilt. And they started doing it. And that if we hadn't had that oil, first of all, when you went to borrow, who would have allowed you to borrow that much? But now, because we had that oil, we'll pay with oil in 10 to 15 years' time.
Yeah.
So we
Another aspect is Dutch disease.
Yes. So now, the point I'm making here is that it goes back to the agriculture link. You see, these things don't stand alone. A country doesn't develop in silos. One decision affects another. If we had managed our palm oil like Malaysia did, and they got it from us, they use their palm oil to fund their oil industry. By that meaning that they've invested their own money in that and they bought the technical expertise. If we had had our money from palm oil, we wouldn't have had only 5-6% of our oil income now. We would have been using our own money to invest in that oil, and we would have built up the expertise, which will mean that our local content and the income that will remain in the country from that industry will be greater. So these one decision has a consequence along the road, and it affects so many other things because they're integrated.
Right.
And when we come down to talking about funding for agriculture, it's plain and simple. Until you have a separate window for lending to agriculture and industry, you can talk and have all the fancy programs you like. You will not see the kind of growth that transforms agriculture along the chain from the small-scale farmers to the largest scale farmers, from low mechanization to high mechanization, from low productivity to high productivity. You will not see that because agriculture needs a special window around the nature of the business, and also because it is a public good. One of the things and that's why I like this comment that my colleague is making, that you can't go by the textbook economics. There are things in agriculture which are perceived as private goods, but they're actually public goods. If I build an irrigation system to my farm, yes, it's going to come and service my farm, but it's a public good. It is not a private good. It's the same way you travel on your car to the office. The water travels to my farm. I should pay for the water, yes, but I shouldn't pay for the infrastructure for the water. And if you want to know the truth of it, go to Israel and find out if any farmer pays for infrastructure. Go to other countries and find out if they don't get rebates for the infrastructure, which means that they're now operating, paying only for the water and their inputs, and competing against you, who has to borrow money at high interest rates, invest it in infrastructure, which is a long term, and then come and compete with them. That's
Right.
why you cannot even produce and capture your own market.
Right.
And then you want to compete with who? So these fundamentals must be got right.
All right.
If you don't get it right, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's like running on a conveyor belt, which is going at a speed which you can't maintain. You can pretend for a while that you can do it, but sooner or later you'll get tired. And we all know what happens when you get tired on a conveyor belt. And that is why you keep having to get IMF to put you back on the conveyor belt.
Right. There's a lengthy message here from Ankida Punabantu about the Zambian example and looking at the budget, looking at the deficit, spreading across taxation, minimally across the population, the taxable population, and making the most of the situation over time to ensure that you bridge your deficit and then you get surpluses and pump them into the economy. It's rather lengthy. I'm just trying to summarize as well as I can. It's a very long piece. Abubakar Latif says, this is mostly because we're afraid to tell the truth. You and I know the causal agents for this shaky economy. Our leaders always share among themselves and no auditing, whatever, not to talk of prosecuting culprits. Junior says, I didn't know we had all these elite thinkers in the country. Joy News, thank you for the panelist selection. You are very unique. Keep it up. It was through your channel I got to know, you say, Professor Jampo, Adam Bona and co. You are doing well, Benjamin and co. All right, we're grateful for those kind thoughts. Gentlemen, to wrap the conversation, I'll give you about a minute each, please, for the sake of time. Let's stick to it. I'll start with you, Professor Aka. Heading into 2024, we're going to the polls again, and the politicians will come knocking on our doors. They will be on your TV screens, on your radio, in the newspapers. They will come eating with you, pounding fufu with you, cooking banku with you. But what should we be looking out for in terms of our economy and going beyond the IMF? What should we be looking at? 1 minute each, gentlemen. Professor Aka.
Well, thank you very much. In terms of what we should be looking out for, it depends on what is available. I mean, our politics has become almost two-party, and many times you don't have a choice, really. You may decide not to vote or to choose between what is available. In the place where I live, for example, we have changed. I mean, every 4 years we move from NDC MPP. We've never had an MP that from one party for more than 4 years, but we still haven't seen real development for all these years I've lived here. So we have a problem. But I just think what we need is trustworthy people. At least if they don't have what it takes to develop their country, there must be people who are also not going to steal and not going to be people who can be trusted. So let's look for the best. I think we need to move away from NDC MPP and look for the best that the country has. Actually, this country has a lot of good people. I met, and one of my disappointment came. I used to meet the MPs in Koforidua after every budget was read to try to do a presentation of an analysis of the budget to give them more understanding for their budget debate. And I think in one of the conversations, I was telling them that I thought our political economy was not giving us the best. When we Ghana football, we are playing World Cup, we don't look at MPP and DC. We look at who is a Ghanaian and is a good player all over the world. We go and look for them and bring them to come and play for Ghana. And I think that's the thing we need to do. That's what Singapore did. And that's what countries that have developed did. We will still have NDC MPP. But for God's sake, if we want to develop this country, we must look at who we put in ministerial positions. And I'm afraid that some of the people we have appointed as ministers or CEOs of state-owned enterprises, they cannot manage a farm. They don't have what it takes. But because of our politics, nepotism, and here and there, we just put people there. And I think that's not giving us the best. Let's look at the best as if this Ghana is a black star. And It doesn't matter if somebody is MPP or NDC. And let's bring them. Some of them may not be involved in politics. I can name 2-3 good economists, more than me. Some of them taught me economics. And they are still there. They don't belong to NDC or MPP. Nobody has put them even on a board. They could have been on the board of Central Bank or board of Ministry of Finance somewhere, but because they don't have a party card. So that is, in terms of, all of us are responsible for that. And I think we need to change. But finally, in terms of IMF, to be honest with you, the IMF package is not going to give us much. And I think my colleague already said, if you look at their own projections, even by 2027, we will still be almost going back to the IMF again. I think, honestly, what we need to do is to have another almost century consensus. Bring all the brains together, academia, civil society, both political parties, all political parties, and let's look at all the economic departments we have in the country, all the big universities, business schools, governance, political science, and let's sit down and let's work with the National Development Planning Commission. So what kind of Ghana do we want in the next 20, 25 years for our children? And then let's put our heads together. And I think we can have a homegrown solution that is better than what IMF is giving us.
Professor Aka, we're so grateful that you've taken the time to join us this morning. Dr. Saad Iddrisu, it's your turn now. Please manage the time for us if you can. Dr. Iddrisu.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, since you are ending the discussion on politics, let me say that looking at the current economic crisis, if Ghanaians are to vote on the economy and not on religion, not on ethnicity or tribes, then we'll say that John Mahama will be the next president. And in that case, I would like President John Dramani Mahama to put a cap on government borrowing when he comes to power in 2025. That should be the first policy he should implement if we really mean well for the development of Ghana and not just for the selfish interests of politicians. Number two, I would like President John Dramani Mahama in 2025 to implement Youth in Agriculture program in Ghana. Youth in Agriculture program, not NDC politics or not NDC grassroots in agriculture, like we had with the case of the planting for food. We must have a purely national policy whereby we encourage the youth to go into agriculture, large-scale agriculture. See, the Ghanaian youth, after completing degree, is expecting an office job. It's like a mindset. We have to change that. We have to put government policy in place to be able to change that. So that once youth are able to go into agriculture, we'll have much more to even feed our nation and think of export. Right. And the third aspect, this why it doesn't just go to John Dramani Mahama or any, I mean, it goes to all of us as citizens. We have to respect the youth. See, let me tell you, Ben, I've been speaking on economic issues since the government took power. I'm less than 40 years. And if you go back to what I've said, a lot of them has even occurred before, I said them. You understand? And some of them, I've even said them even before it comes to power. I mean, it comes into being, like the excessive government borrowing I was talking of. Since March, I've been speaking about that, only for us to find ourselves in this debt situation. We have to respect the youth, the knowledge from the youth. We have to move away from this, the person must be old before they could speak to government.
Right.
Someone being less than 40 years doesn't mean that the person doesn't have the knowledge to advise government.
In other jurisdictions, less than 40-year-olds are becoming leaders of their countries.
Are becoming president. But in Ghana, I've had people call me, we just check your age on Google. You are even less than 40. What has it got to do with what I am talking about for the development of Ghana? We have to, our older generation need to really respect the youth and put people in proper positions. Like one of the panelists said, some of the ministers, believe me, if they had given such positions even to the youth, they could have been done better. Right. We've had people, government comes into power, they will look at the person's age and say, you cannot be a finance minister. What has age got to do with running a finance ministry? Or what has it got to do with running different portfolios?
And the older ones who have run the ministries, the older ones, how have they fared?
The older ones, how have they fared? So that is my hope, people. We have to start respecting the youth and the knowledge that they bring on board. We shouldn't just be Googling their ages and speaking as if, because they are young, they cannot speak on national development. That is not how countries develop. You develop based on knowledge. You develop based on theories.
All right.
And finally, I will say that we must really look at our local economy and provide solutions to the local economy, aside from the textbook situation. Saudi Arabia, other countries, they are doing that. Qatar and co, they are doing that. That is why they don't have income tax. That is why they don't have sales tax. We can do similar things. I'm not saying we should cancel taxes, but we should reduce taxes to be able to stimulate business growth. That is why I say you can do your checks.
All businesses. Right. I have to cap it off here, Dr. Iddrisu. Before I do the next two, Junior is just reminding me, they want your social media handles. I don't know whether you can share, Professor Aka, if you're still on, just so I don't lose you. Professor Aka, if you're with us, do you have a social media handle?
I don't really have, but I think maybe I have to go on social media.
Okay,
but you can give my number to whoever wants to contact me.
Okay, so we can do that off air. Maybe we can identify this person. So for the rest of the speakers, if you're on social media, you can just share your handles so that some of these people can get interactive with you. Dr. Iddrisu, do you have a social media handle? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
No, I'm not on social media. You can give my number to anybody who wants it.
All right. Dr. Kennedy, your turn, sir.
Thank you. To Dr. Iddrisu's point, age certainly is a number, but it matters. The youngest ever Prime Minister of Britain was William Pitt the Younger at 24, and he was a very good Prime Minister. Not only that, the best chancellor Germany has ever had was Konrad Adenauer, and he was chancellor in his 80s. So I think we should judge people based on competence rather than based on their age. And actually, most of the people who ran Africa into the ground were young men in their prime. Rawlins, Michael Barrow, all those generals, most of them were very young men. So I just say, let's look at what people can do rather than their ages. I think we need smaller, smarter government. And I want to share with you something somebody told me. I hope his family will forgive me. Late Jake Obeche Bilamte was my boss when I was working in the MPP, and he was a beloved guy. One day, I saw him a little downcast, and in a moment of candor, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, because of what they did to my father, I hated politics for a long time. I joined it, I've done it for a long time, but I don't know whether maybe I should have left it alone, because between the two of us, more and more, our coming out of investment, which of them will get to steal from Ghana for the next 4 years. And those words were prophetic. I think as patriotic Ghanaians, we should always reflect on what Jake said. We need decentralized government, and we need integrity in our governance.
Right.
There are too many people in government who are there to loot resources from the public space into the private pockets of their cronies and their families. And that's part of why we are in trouble. We should invest vigorously in agriculture and tourism. Those two are angles that will help us a lot. We have an angle on tourism, and I can foresee a national museum dedicated to slavery built in Accra. I can see a trip from Accra to Cape Coast where we've refurbished the castles, a trip to Asin where they used to give the slaves their last birth, and millions of people will trek there and bring a lot of money, and we must treat our diaspora community better.
Right.
No nation develop without the talent of their diaspora, and we should stop stupid policies like the National Cathedral. I thank you very much.
Dr. Foster, you have the final say. We really have to go, so please make it as brief as possible.
Well, I think doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons in the wrong ways has become the norm. So we need a fundamentally new rethinking, a new mindset to approach governance with. And for me, that is what I'm looking out for in the 2024 election.
Right.
Is there anybody with a fundamentally new mindset? Will that lead to the fundamental reforms? Because you can only do what is in your mind. If it's not in your mind, you can't do it. If you don't have a mind that you've done something wrong and you need to change it, you only keep doing the wrong things. So I want to see a fundamentally new approach that will use the best of us and put Ghana's best foot forward. That is what I want to see happening. And then we can begin to address the many myriad of problems we have in a systematic way. Because until we do that, we will keep operating for partisan political advantage, doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons in the wrong ways. Thank you.
Paul Assam says, thank you for such an enlightening discussion. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. Those who joined us for this conversation, Dr. Saad Iddrisu, economist, Louisiana Economic Development, Professor Charles Aka, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Dr. Arthur Kobina Kennedy, political activist, and Dr. Abu Sakara Foster, founder, National Interest Movement. I cannot thank you enough, gentlemen, for making the time to join us this morning with your thoughts, your enlightenment, and your patriotism. Thank you so much. On now to our next conversation. The Media Foundation for West Africa in partnership with the National Peace Council, the National Media Commission, and the National House of Chiefs, will host a public forum on the theme Media, Hate Speech, and Democratic Consolidation in Ghana. Now, there's a lot to discuss on this matter, and we'll be bringing that to you right after the break. Do stay. So joining us on that conversation about the media, hate speech, and consolidating our democracy, as has been put forward by the Media Foundation for West Africa, we have joining the conversation Kweku Krobia Asante. He is Communications Lead, Media Foundation for West Africa. Mr. Asante, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Benjamin.
Let's talk about this drive. You have a number of institutions that you are collaborating with on this, but why this theme and why this drive at this time?
Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. I think that in the last few months, we have been realizing the growing incidence of hate speech, of abusive language, of misinformation, all on our airwaves and our prints and our online news websites. That is getting to a point that is extremely worrying. Notable of them is the recent comment by the minister, a Greek minister, at a rally organized by his party, making comments that suggested that they will use all possible means, including even if it has to come to where they will use means that are not recommended to stay in power and to ensure that they hold on to power in the coming elections. Also in Boko, we have seen what is happening. At the heart of what is happening at Boko is radio stations or media platforms being used as weapons and tools to fund, incite people into the violence that is happening. And many others that is creeping up, especially because of what is we are realizing the by-elections that is happening around and all of that. It is fanning flames, and we are very mindful that we are heading to the 2024 elections. It's just about 1 year and 6 months to the general elections, and this is extremely worrying. Even for our monitoring over the period, it is beginning to be too early, even for such, heightened tension and all that. And we thought that we should bring together stakeholders, bring together the major people who have influence on this subject matter to address or make concrete steps and recommendations so that we can nip this in the bud even before we get into the election period.
Now, you're doing this in conjunction with the National Peace Council, the National Media Commission, the National House of Chiefs, and all of that. What went into selecting these institutions or these bodies? Especially, for example, the National House of Chiefs. You mentioned what is happening in Boku, and some, of the rhetoric. Look at Galamsey, for example. I know I'm straying from the actual theme, but what went into selecting these groupings, and what are you hoping to achieve by bringing them on board?
Well, first off, the conversation is so much about the media. The National Media Commission is the statutory body set up to ensure professional and ethical standards in the media. They themselves have been at the forefront of fighting this issue. They issued a statement on the Boko incidents, calling on owners of radio stations to be mindful of how they use their platforms to incite violence. So we thought it is important that we have the National Media Commission on board. Two, we thought that it is important that we have the National Peace Council, as this also borders on the country's peace and stability. And of course, they are also in charge of that. And then we bring in the National House of Chiefs, primarily because we know that the incidents that we are realizing has to do with chieftaincy issues, the Boko case, for instance, and a lot of times too, when it comes to people who have control on the local people and communities, it's about the chiefs. A conversation about peace, a conversation about democratic consolidation, it's not possible if you don't bring at the lower level, step in and calm tensions. And so we thought that we should bring in the National Media Commission, we should bring in the National Peace Council, the National House of Chiefs, and of course, bring you in, Joy 99.7 and Joy News to also be partners, also as a very credible media outlet who have stood out over the period in ensuring that when it comes to ethics and professional standards, you are in there, but also to reach a lot of audience through your platform.
Now, in terms of the forum addressing the incidents of hate speech, abusive language in the media and the public discourse, tell us a bit about some of those who are going to be speaking to those issues tomorrow at the British Council.
Well, like you have mentioned, the program is tomorrow at the British Council, 9 o'clock in the morning, or 9:30 a.m. By 9 o'clock, the guests will start coming in. We have the keynote speaker being His Excellency Charles Abani, who is the UN Resident Coordinator for Ghana. And then we have the chairperson of the event being the National Peace Council Chairman, Reverend Dr. Ernest Edujemfi, who will be chairing the occasion. And then we have panelists going to generate key talking points, raise thoughts on the subject matter. We have the Executive Secretary, George Sapon, of the National Media Commission joining us. We have Madam Clara Kasati, who is the Vice Chairperson of the Board of Directors for CDD Ghana. Of course, CDD Ghana is an opinion leader, thought leader when it comes to issues of democracy and development in the country. We have Dr. Festus Obin, who is the Regional Coordinator, Research and Capacity Building for ONEF. ONEF is also in the conversation when it comes to elections and peace building. They are very influential in that. And then we have the President of the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, Mr. Cecil Sunkwame. Of course, GEBA is also, in terms of the conversation being on radio and how the platforms are being used. GEBA is the body an association that has independent broadcasters together, and ensuring that the standards are protected in that order. And so we have all these key personalities coming on board to generate conversations, to make recommendations that will guide in protecting our airwaves, our media platforms against this proliferation of hate-sent expressions, especially going to the elections and protecting Ghana's democratic consolidation.
So all roads lead tomorrow at 9:30 a.m., arrival at 9 a.m., to the British Council for this all-important event. Any final words in the next few seconds as we wrap?
Well, I have to reiterate that the conversation is going to be carried live on Joy 99.7 and will also be carried on Joy News. And so people who cannot be on TV, but we want to invite everybody who is a major stakeholder, journalists, media editors, even people who have interest in the conversation to be there. Will make concrete recommendations. In fact, we are bringing in and all the players and actors in the political space to make commitment to peace at the forum so that we can protect our airwaves heading into the election and ensure that the gains we have made in terms of stability, peace, and democracy will be protected.
Mr. Asante, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the good work. Kweku Probi Asante is Communications Lead, Media Foundation for West Africa. Now, tomorrow, the 14th day of June, marks World Blood Donor Day. It is celebrated throughout the world, and the day provides a special opportunity to celebrate and thank voluntary blood donors like me around the world for their gift of blood, and has become a major focus for action towards achieving universal access to safe blood transfusion. But how exactly are we faring as a country? What is the state of our national blood bank? We give you the details as we host those officers right here on the AM show. We'll be right back. Well, here we are back talking about World Blood Donor Day and how we're faring as a country and what we can be looking forward to. Some of these conversations we have had in the past, our National Blood Bank and what the dynamics are. Well, today we are hosting two officers, Dr. Dillis, I hope I got the name correct, Dillis, okay, John Tay, Acting Head, Southern Zonal Blood Center, National Blood Bank. We also have Dr. Angela Akon. There are a lot of health professionals who are Akon. I'm wondering, I'll be finding out whether there's any. Dr. Angela Akon, Technical Officer, Quality and Safety, WHO Country Office. Ladies, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
You're looking wonderful this morning. You're about to come and talk about blood and pricking us a bit, but you're looking all wonderful while doing it. What is the state, just to start off the conversation, what is the state of our blood pool, our National Blood Bank? How are we faring? How have we fared over the last few years? How are we faring in 2023?
Thank you very much. And before I start, I would prefer you use National Blood Service instead of the bank.
Okay, noted.
Yes, so the mandate of the National Blood Service is to make safe, adequate blood available to patients who require blood transfusion as part of their treatment in both public and private hospitals. And to be able to perform this role, we depend on voluntary donors or donors. Unfortunately, our voluntary donor pool in Ghana is not very encouraging. We appreciate the good job they do to make blood available to patients. But in Ghana, if you're about 30 million and we expected to have about 300,000 units of blood.
But are you basing that, because 30 million, yes, 31 million thereabouts.
Yes.
Are you basing that on the whole pool? Because not everybody can
yes, so
donate
it's 1% of the population that donates blood.
Right.
So from that calculation, we have about
300,000.
Yes.
Right.
But generally, we have about 170,000.
That's a shortfall of about 130,000.
Sometimes it's lower than that, yes. And out of this, for the national figures, we have only about 26%. It may go a bit high. So less than 30% of this population that donates blood are voluntary blood donors. And voluntary blood donors are said to be the safest source of blood for patients who require transfusion. So you can imagine that most of our blood sources, which would have been very safe, we meet less than 50% of that. And so hospitals put the burden on patients' relatives to beef up this shortage or to bring it up to an appreciable level. But when a patient needs blood and it's an emergency, it's not a time for you to look for a patient's relative. Blood is a drug. It's like paracetamol. It needs to be on the shelf before the patient
Sometimes, in fact, there's no time for that. It's an emergency.
So, unfortunately, we are not able to meet the needs of most of our patients in Ghana.
When you say most of your patients, break it down for us. Are you talking 60%, 50%, I mean 80%? How bad is it? I think we have to paint the real picture so that people out there know that.
Barely 60% of the needs if we add in both voluntary and then family replacement donors.
Wow. So you have a deficit of about 40%.
A lot.
So let me just ask this for all of us. If we don't donate blood, and if the family members are unable to, because I remember I donate last year, maybe twice, to the 37 hospital. There's a situation where the person was at Kolebu, and I literally had to, because of her blood type and her surgery, I literally had to campaign to get people to go donate for this person. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But if we don't donate voluntarily, and if family members, maybe on the back of health issues or something, are unable to donate, how does the service source blood? Because you can't use a goat's blood, or touchwood, or some other. So how do you do it? Or does that mean the people will have to be left to their fate?
That is what it means. That is what it means. And we don't want it to be that way. So we continue with our campaign. You can imagine if you need to meet the needs with about 300,000 and you're having 170,000, you are losing some patients.
Some patients will have to literally die.
Yes, that's the
I want us to paint the stark picture so that those watching us will realize if we don't donate, this is what is going to happen. And it could be your relative, it could be my relative. It doesn't discriminate.
It doesn't discriminate.
Let me come to you, Dr. Akon. And by the way, I don't know what the secret is with the Akons and being medical doctors. I know a few of you.
We can unpack that later.
We can unpack that later. But I also know, I'm just getting into some bare bones of the conversation about blood donation before we come to World Blood Donor Day. We also know that there are some circumstances that prevent people from donating. Some talk about tattoos and all of that. I just want you to briefly walk us through some of them for those watching who may be contemplating, because that may also prevent some people from donating. What is the reality of that?
Yes, so thanks for that. Indeed, there are quite a number of categories of people who cannot donate blood. And as you rightly put it, one of such people are those with tattoos.
Why though?
Of course.
I do understand, but for everybody else
once you have a tattoo, it means that you've tampered with the regular barrier through which blood would be drawn out of your system. And as much as possible, we try to promote and communicate that it is not just about the blood, but it's also about the quality and the safety of the blood for the one who will be receiving it, at the end of the day. There are also, of course, we also say if you're a pregnant woman and you're a breastfeeding woman, you obviously cannot donate blood during that time. And then generally, if you feel unwell, or you are anemic, these are all people who cannot, donate blood.
Christians fast, Muslims fast.
Yeah.
I hear around that time too. It's
not a safe time to actually also donate blood. And one factor also, that's why we continue to promote donation of blood from voluntary, non-remunerated donors, because studies have shown that this group of people are you won't find the typical blood-borne diseases in the products they donate. Loosely, when you have conversations here and there, you realize if you speak to people just on the street, they'll tell you, oh yes, we know that it's good to donate blood. When I donate blood, I can save a life. But then I would like to know what's in for me, for instance. These are just loose conversations we have here and there. Yeah. So really, what is really needed is to reach out to these people through what we are doing now, for instance, and through public awareness campaigns, education, for them to understand that blood is a life-saving gift, and I don't know how much you can pay somebody to donate blood. So really, it's what we can freely give to people who really are sick and would need.
You know what it reminds me of? I've actually never thought of it in this light, but as you spoke, I'm assuming I am Christian, so where Jesus says, greater love has no man than to give up his life. And I think this is it. You may not literally die, but when you give blood, it is life you are giving to someone else. But tell me, what is unique about this celebration that we are having in Ghana this year? This year, you're saying we should give blood and another form of it, plasma, among other things. Enlighten us on what all of this is.
We are saying give blood, give plasma, share life, share orphan. So you rightly said, when you give blood, you have given life. But if you don't do it often, it will not be available. There's always a shelf life of drug. And even for blood, it's even shorter. So if we do it less often, then we only want to say that only a few people should benefit. In Ghana, we can donate every 4 months, so 3 times a year. Anybody who is eligible to donate can donate. And what is special about this year? This year, apart from the fact that we always talk about blood, which often includes the plasma and other components, we are also stressing on plasma. People should also give plasma because there are patients who may not need the red part of the blood, but they need plasma. Now, when you allow blood to settle, there's usually a yellow fluid on top of it, and that is plasma. And plasma is made up of important proteins that help the body. And typically, we have what we call clotting factors. So in case you have a cut, these are the proteins that would help prevent excessive bleeding when you have a cut. There are people who have, unfortunately, disease conditions that make them have fewer or less amount of clotting factors. And so they would have to be transfused a plasma product to replace the clotting factors to prevent excessive bleeding. And so that is the importance of plasma. We can get the plasma from the whole blood, like I said, but there is another method where you can also donate only plasma.
I see.
It's called apheresis. So
that I did not know.
Yes. So apart from plasma, you can also donate only the red cells.
Okay.
So those are, the technique is apheresis.
Okay.
Now, the other thing about this year's celebration is that we involved patients who had benefited from blood transfusion to share their stories so that the people who come out to donate blood know that their blood donations actually go in to save people's lives.
Okay.
And so you hear the stories and you are motivated to continue donating blood.
And that's why we're here. We have to continue. But let me come to Dr. Akon. What role has the WHO, your outfit, played in all of this in terms of blood donation, the campaign, and all of that? And beyond today, I'm sure the rhetoric will not stop. You will not stop the campaign. What next can we expect?
Definitely. So let me begin by the roles WHO has played. And in 2005, at the World Health Assembly, was where the World Blood Donor Day was designated an official event, purposefully to celebrate and thank blood donors, voluntary blood donors. And since that time, it's become, a focus for all activities or supported activities towards ensuring that blood and blood products are available and accessible to the people who need them. What does this come with? It comes with policy direction for countries. It comes with technical guidance for countries. It also comes with support that we provide to countries for the education of the public, campaigns here and there, not here and there, but strategically and targeted campaigns. We always call for year-round blood donation. As she indicated earlier, this year, our slogan is focused specifically on those patients who rely on or who would need lifelong transfusion. So we are calling this year, beyond the World Blood Donor Day celebration, for a year-long donation of blood. We are appealing to healthy individuals who can donate blood as regularly as possible. To do so, you said you donated twice last year. That's the minimum. You can donate more than twice in a year.
That's about what, 3 times, right?
Yes, something
every
like
quarter.
That. Yes, something like that. And you see, apart from those who rely on it throughout their life, we also have patients who need it here and there. If you join us tomorrow for the commemoration of the day, I'm sure you hear of at least 3 individuals whose stories we've specifically heard, shared with us last year, one of whom needed about 30 units of blood to pull
30?
through. 30 units of blood to pull through, and she's alive today. For me.
Wait, that must have been quite a procedure.
Yes.
30 units. That's what, is that 30 pints?
30,
yes.
500 mils by 30, right? The size of a
30
regular...
pints?
Yes.
That is 30 donations?
Yes.
Wow.
And she's alive today. So if this is not motivating enough for you to donate blood, I really don't know what would be. So WHO continues to provide support, and it's our major focus, one of our strategies to support low and middle income countries like Ghana, ensuring that, we keep the momentum in whatever we need to do to ensure that there's sustainable donation of blood to meet the needs of the country. Yeah.
Dr. Jontai, you have the final bite. So what next for the blood service? I've asked her what next for her from her end. What next for the blood service? And what are some of the activities you've lined up for tomorrow's celebration?
So for tomorrow's celebration, it's basically to thank the voluntary blood donors. And this time we recognize those who even do it for family members, because we can convert them to become voluntary donors. So we thank all blood donors and then share the life-saving stories of other people who have benefited from blood donation. But it doesn't end tomorrow. I think we started last week with a thank you cake carton. Next week we have a health week to increase the to increase the sensitization of the need to donate blood among the community. What next? We have a mandate, and we'll keep working. We'll continue to knock on the doors of the faith-based institutions like the churches, the mosque, the schools, the corporate institutions like Joy News, so that you come on board. You either support us or you donate blood yourself to improve the stock of various hospital blood banks so that patients will have readily available blood when they need it.
How about we do both? We'll support you and we'll donate. So, yeah.
Even better.
But it's a cause that affects all of us. You never know when you will end up in a hospital facility and require blood. And some of us are universal donors, sort of. So even better, because when we donate, what do I say? Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Dr. Dillis Jontai, Acting Head, Southern Zonal Blood Center, National Blood Service, not bank. And then, I didn't forget, Dr. Angela Akon, Technical Officer, Quality and Safety, WHO Country Officer. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Before we take our final breath on the show, so to speak, let me just let you know that when I knock off, I have a bottle of Awake drinking water. I literally do. They saw them out there. That's what I'm going to be drinking. And here's why. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And if you're thinking of the different sizes, they've got you covered as well. 330 milliliters, 500 milliliters. For your children, you can put it in their backpacks or their lunch boxes when they're going to school. There's 750 milliliters and 1.5 liters for those like me who always like to drink more. That's why we also produce a lot more blood. So guess what? If you want water, think Awake. But there's more for you if you're at home, if you're in your office and you want something bigger. They have 19-liter jar bottles that are ideal for homes and offices. So all you have to do now is stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. But there's something that I find even more heartwarming about Awake Purified Drinking Water. For every bottle you purchase, a donation, a token amount is given to the Ghana Cardiothoracic Center. People who can't afford heart treatment and all of that are catered for through that safety net. It's another quality product by Casapreco Company Limited. If you'd like to purchase in bulk, just call this number, 0262 351 251, 0262 351 251. Remember, this advert is FDA approved. Now, as we wrap the conversation, a birthday wish that we have coming through. Let me just get to it briefly. Now my phone decides not to turn on just when I need it to do so. Okay, so here it is. Sister Teresa Pearl Kwanzaa. Sister Teresa Pearl Kwanzaa. It's from your Our Lady of Assumption Sisters, Ola, and they say, happy birthday to you. And me being Catholic, happy birthday to you, Sister Teresa Pearl Kwanzaa. May God richly bless you in your ministry. That's how we cap off the AM show this morning. There's been a lot that we've spoken about, a lot to digest, a lot to reflect upon as a people. Catch me same time tomorrow at 6 o'clock as we serve you. But up next, Joy News Desk. Stay with us and get informed. Good day.